Prayers.
Almighty God, who in infinite wisdom and providential goodness has appointed the offices of leaders and parliaments for the welfare of society and just government of humanity, we beseech you to look upon with abundant favor these your servants whom you have been pleased to call to the performance of such important trusts in this land. Let your blessing descend upon them here assembled, and grant that they may, as in your presence, treat and consider all matters that shall come under the deliberation in so just and faithful a manner as promote your honor and glory, and to advance the good of those whose interest you've committed to their charge. Amen.
Item 2 on the order paper, communication from the chair.
Right Honorable the Prime Minister, members of Parliament, I welcome you back to the sittings of the House, and I want to thank the committees of the House for the work done to ensure that we can lay the budget framework paper today. I also want to thank the members of the Cabinet for the cooperation in that exercise. I'm also informing that we held the meetings of the East African Legislative Assembly here, and the Speaker of the Year extends his gratitude to all of you, the members and the staff, for the support rendered to them during that period. This is their last session. They'll be moving to Kigali to conclude the term of their assembly. Now, honour members, I'm required under the Public Finance Management Act to establish two committees for classified expenditure. So I've appointed the following to the Committee on Classified Expenditure on Accounts: the Honourable Angeline Osege, Chairperson Public Accounts Committee; Honourable John Baptist Loki, Member of the Public Accounts Committee; and Honourable Alex Vyarugaba, Member of the Public Accounts Committee. I'm also required to appoint on budget expenditure another Committee on Classified Expenditure. I therefore have appointed Honourable Amos Lugorobi, Chair of the Budget Committee; the Honourable Judith Navakova, Chair of the Committee on Defence and Internal Affairs; the Honourable Fred Mwesige, Chair of the Committee on Presidential Affairs. Now, honour members, during the time you've been busy, we have received information that in some parts of the country, there are people who are fencing off wetlands and cutting off the water rights of other users, and also denying them access, especially in the east. So I want to ask the Minister for Environment to take an interest in that, to ensure that the citizens have access to water and that no one can deprive them of that right together with their animals. We also want to ask the members to sensitize the population on the proper use of the wetlands to avert the effects of climatic change, which you can see. They are very, very visible. We no longer have to speculate on what can happen. What can happen has actually happened. So let us take action on those issues. So, honour members, welcome, and let's proceed with the work. I think there was a matter from Honourable Okupa. 2 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, just on your communication on the issue of the environment. Madam Speaker, last time we were told here that the company called SGS that's going to do vehicle inspection, surprisingly has been allocated a swamp on Kampala Gulu Road. They are busy reclaiming the land, blocking the drainage from that area. So, Madam Speaker, I think the Prime Minister should really uphold whoever gave that company that swamp on that road to stop it, because it's going to block the drainage. No wonder that's why we're having floods in Kawempe, in Boise. Two, Madam Speaker, which I want to put to the government, the Right Honourable Prime Minister. Government in the process of us establish or having a standard gauge railway. But it's surprising, on the 7th Street, on the land that belongs to the Uganda Railways, formerly, somebody has been given to construct a supermarket just on the 7th Street here. And tomorrow we shall begin compensating these people. Yet we are going to establish a standard gauge railway. So, Madam Speaker, I think the government should stop whoever is doing the construction along that, on the 7th Street, along the railway line. It's not only that limited to that, even where there is this ICD mask, they are busy chasing people and starting construction. So I think we cannot accept to be losing money like that. Someone starts constructing, government has a big project, someone has been awarded, and they are busy constructing. So I think government should be able to come up with a statement whether they have stopped these people who are doing the construction along that area.
Honorable Karungi.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, we have been unfortunate. I don't know whether it's only Uganda and the whole world. This sunshine has been too much, almost everywhere in Uganda. And the other day, I saw rain starting, and I was very happy. But then my heart told me that it could be rain for a short time. So I think it is good that we get informed through those people who are concerned in that area, whether we are going to have a lot of rain or little, so that we tell our people to plan very well for this little rain which we are seeing, or plan otherwise. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Okay, but on the point of the standard gauge rail, can you tell us the road so that we know what instructions to give the minister?
Just on the 7th Street, as you get out from opposite the former the Shell depot, that's where the construction is taking place. And then towards the end, near the Mask ICD, Terminal Container Depot, that's where the construction and the people are being chased away from. And this is for having come from the Committee of Physical Infrastructure. We are being told some people are being compensated and the construction is going to start soon. But we are seeing people constructing along that. Unless they are telling us that that's not where the line is going to pass.
Prime Minister.
Thank you very much, Right Honourable Speaker. The points raised by Ndugu Okupa are taken seriously. We are now in the process of compensating people to ensure that the route for the standard gauge railway is clear. So if anybody is jumping in to construct something, then that will be trying to reverse the process that is underway. So your point is going to be investigated and appropriate action taken, and the House will be accordingly informed. The second point on wetlands being given for somebody to construct inspection yard, wetlands, as far as we are concerned, are no-go areas, except for specifically legally authorized activities. For example, I'll just give an example. Some wetland areas can be authorized by NEMA to be used for fish farming. Yeah. Therefore, so long as something is legally authorized,
I'm seeking clarification.
okay, you have
Honorable
it.
Namayanja.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Right Prime Minister. The clarification I'm seeking. Recently, the President gave a directive that whoever is in the wetland must vacate. I want to know from you, Mr. Prime Minister, how is this going to be achieved? Because it's not only what the Honorable has just talked about, but there are so many people who are occupying the wetlands. How are we going to see implementation? And how do you want us to participate in this? Because it concerns all of us.
Right Honourable Speaker, on question of people living wetlands, what the President said is actually correct. Wetlands are meant to be wetlands and to be reserved as such. We know that wetlands have been encroached on by different people in different ways over different periods. Government is studying in detail the modalities of how wetlands can be best recovered without causing unnecessary chaos. So a plan is underway. We have already had an atlas for wetlands in the country, and that program is going to be done. And government is very steadfast on that issue. The last point by my sister Kalunji, yes, this House, actually I have already had a discussion with the Minister of Agriculture, Ndugu Sempija. This House is going to be given information on issues of drought and rain and when to plant, so the House will be informed very soon by the Minister responsible.
Clarification.
Item 2, item 3.
Item 3, laying of papers. 3.1, brief to Parliament on a proposal to borrow special drawing rights 35.5 million, equivalent of $50 million from the International Development Association IDA of the World Bank Group to support the development response to displacement impacts project in the Horn of Africa.
Minister of Finance.
Madam Speaker and honorable colleagues, I beg to lay on table the proposal to borrow $50 million from the International Development Association of the World Bank to support the development response to displacement impacts project in the Horn of Africa.
The members sent to the Committee of National Economy for perusal and report back.
Item 3.2, the Land Fund report on the achievements and challenges for the periods July 2014 to June 2015 and July 2015 to June 2016.
Minister of Lands.
Madam Speaker and honorable colleagues, I beg to lay the Land Fund report on the achievements and challenges for the periods July 2014-2015 and July 2015 to June 2016.
For the members, I need to check which is the appropriate committee to handle this Land Fund report. I'll assign it in a few minutes. Item 4.
Item 4, motion for presentation, consideration, and adoption of the report of the Budget Committee on the National Budget Framework paper for the financial year 2015-2018 and financial year 2021-2022.
Chair of the Budget Committee. Ati?
Chairperson, yeah.
Right Honourable Speaker, I beg to present the report of the Budget Committee on the National Budget Framework paper for the financial year 2017-18, 2021-2022. This document is available on your iPads. Right Honourable Speaker, honourable members, in accordance with the provisions of Articles 90 and 155(4) of the Constitution, Section 9(1) to 9(8) of the Public Finance Management Act 2015 and Rule 177 of the Rules of Procedure of Parliament, committees are mandated to, among other things, to critically examine government budget estimates and make recommendations for general debate in the House, as well as commenting on any policy matters affecting ministries under their jurisdiction. In compliance with the above provisions, I beg to present a report of the Budget Committee on the budget framework paper for the financial year 2017-18 to financial year 2021 for consideration and approval by the August House as required under Section 9(8) of the Public Finance Management Act 2015. On 21st December 2016, Right Honorable Speaker, the Executive complied with the PFMA 2015 by laying on table the budget framework paper for financial year 2017-18 to 2021-22 and a certificate of gender and equity compliance. However, copies of the BFP were available to the members of Parliament on 6 January 2017. The committee recommends that in future, government should ensure that the final copies of the BFP are submitted in a timely manner in accordance with the law. In terms of scope, Right Honorable Speaker, honorable members, we are presenting this report in two parts. The first part being the government medium-term macroeconomic forecast, medium-term fiscal framework and forecast, the Charter of Fiscal Responsibility, the resource envelope, proposed policy measures, and indicative expenditure framework for 2017-18, and the medium-term and fiscal risks. Part two is the sector committee observations and recommendations on government sector plans and expenditure. Right Honorable Speaker, I beg your indulgence, this being a huge report, it has always been the practice that we present part one, and the honorable members should feel free to read part two on their own and make comments accordingly. Part two is, as I mentioned, is on the sectoral recommendations, observations and recommendations. I'll not delve into the methodology. I'll move straight to part one rather, which is the government medium-term macroeconomic forecast, the medium-term fiscal framework, the proposed policy measures, the resource envelope, and the indicative expenditure framework for financial year 2017-18. And I will begin with the general observations. The committee notes that the government has prioritized the following areas for next financial year, 2017-18. Number one, increasing production and productivity in the primary growth sectors of the economy, including agriculture, tourism, oil, gas, and minerals. Number two, supporting private sector development for sustainable employment and economic growth. Number three, enhancing infrastructure development to provide affordable power and lower transportation costs for value addition and enhanced market access. Number four, improving social service delivery. Number five, enhancing economic management and domestic resource mobilization. And number six, improving efficiency in government operations. According to Section 93 of the Public Finance Management Act, the BFP must be consistent with the National Development Plan and with the Charter of Fiscal Responsibility. The Budget Committee observes that financial year 2017 will be the third year running of the current NDP2. Hence, the need to closely scrutinize its consistency with the NDP2. It is advisable that a midterm review of NDP2 be undertaken and remedial actions be taken on sectors which may be falling off track. The midterm review is critical given the new emerging challenges in the economy. The committee observes that during preparation of the BFP 2017-18 to 2021 to 2020-21, several consultations were made to ensure that the BFP is consistent with the Vision 2040, the NDP2, the Sustainable Development Goals, the NRM Manifesto, and the President's 23 strategic directives for the years 2016 to 2021. The committee observes that government has shifted from the output-based budgeting approach to the program-based budgeting, PBB. PBB is a framework in which budget inputs or resources are linked to the achievements of the long-term intended outcomes. Outcomes often take more than a year to be evaluated. However, they are supported by annual outputs. The successful PBB approach is enabled by a functional MTEF and a set of well-developed outcome and output indicators. The committee observes that MDAs have developed outcome indicators, and budget estimates are allocated accordingly. However, under the PBB approach, budget allocations are highly aggregated, which limits information access to budget items, hence constraining information-based decision-making process at Parliament. The committee observes that there was a sudden transition from OBT to PBB with no clear justification to the MDAs and without proper guidance. Consequently, the outcome and output indicators do not have baseline information and they lack means of verification for their respective performances. The committee recommends that the Ministry of Finance should carry out massive sensitization of the PBB to MDAs and local governments and other end users and all stakeholders. In addition, all MDAs should determine baseline indicators and specify targets for 2017-18 as a measure for assessing annual performance against target. This is a mandatory requirement for all MDAs that draw funds from the consolidated fund. Compliance of the Budget Framework Paper to the Public Finance Management Act 2015. Right Honourable Speaker, the committee observes that the BFP is to a large extent consistent with NDP2 and reflects the key strategic objectives of the NDP. In particular, government will continue to prioritize infrastructure investments necessary to facilitate private sector growth and enhance productive capacity of the economy. Government will continue the implementation of NDP2 core projects, such as opening up new roads, the standard gauge rail, oil refinery, oil-related infrastructure in the Albertine region, and electricity transmission projects. These projects are in line with Vision 2040 and the ESC Monetary Union Convergence criteria. The committee noted that in some few areas, the BFP is not consistent with the requirements imposed by Section 9.4 of the PFMA. You may refer to Table 1 below. The law demands that the BFP should indicate actual, estimated, and projections covering the previous 2 financial years, the current financial year, and the next 5 financial years, and indicate in respect of each year the following economic variables: average and year-end GDP, average and year-end rate of inflation, rate of employment and unemployment, average and year-end exchange rate, interest rate, and money supply. The committee observed that the BFP does not indicate projections for some of the mentioned economic variables, like rate of employment and unemployment, interest rates, and money supply for the financial years in the medium-term framework. Therefore, the committee's efforts to scrutinize some of the variables were constrained. Right Honourable Speaker, we present a compliance table as Table 1 of the BFP. And we used this to make conclusions on where government passed and where they failed. they are failing on only 2 accounts out of maybe 10. So the committee notes that the Certificate of Gender and Equity put the BFP compliance level at 57% against the pass mark of 50. Notwithstanding the 3 sectors, GLOS, legislature, and PS, public sector management, which failed to submit their BFPs for assessment in time, and given the background for gender and equity issues in the country, the score is still low. The committee notes that the country lacks baseline compliance indicators upon which gender and equity compliance can be premised. The committee therefore recommends a baseline study which will guide future BFPs and budgets on gender and equity compliance. The committee notes that while the Charter for Fiscal Responsibility was laid on the floor of Parliament and approved on the 21st December 2016, the Minister is yet to publish the final Charter of Fiscal Responsibility as required by Section 5(2) of the Public Finance Management Act. The law requires the Minister to publish the Charter within a period of 1 month after approval by Parliament. The Charter was approved by Parliament with measurable fiscal objectives to guide the country's fiscal framework and enhance fiscal transparency. Right Honourable Speaker, honourable members, the committee is constrained in determining the level of consistency of the Charter of Fiscal Responsibility with the budget framework paper as required by the Public Finance Management Act. The committee recommends that the Minister should provide an explanation to Parliament for that omission. I now turn to the medium-term macroeconomic forecast. The committee observes that the overall medium-term macroeconomic policy goal is to ensure macroeconomic stability through investment in infrastructure to support and sustain economic growth and socio-economic transformation, low and stable rates of inflation, increased domestic resource mobilization, maintain adequate levels of international reserves, and promoting a sustainable and competitive exchange rate. However, in the recent past, the pace of GDP growth, level of inflation, exchange rate, budget execution targets, and foreign exchange reserves have deviated from their respective programmed levels. And this has compromised macroeconomic stability, necessitating adjustments in management of the economy, albeit at a cost. As a result, macroeconomic assumptions have changed to take into account new developments that could lead to a deviation from the country's NDP2 planned path. The committee recommends that the government should stick to its medium-term programmed expenditure path, ensure efficiency and effectiveness in spending to ensure improved service delivery. Real GDP growth rate. The committee notes that although the economy expanded at 4.8% in financial year 2015-16, the growth was 1% less than the projected growth in the NDP2 at 5.8%. The current projection further revises downwards the overall NDP2 growth projection from an average of 6.4% to 6% for the medium term. Please refer to figure 2 below. The continued downward revision of the growth rate has a negative implication for the attainment of the planned overall development objectives under the NDP2. Figure 1 is available, and you can note that the projections for GDP growth are in the curve on top. The last BFP GDP growth rate is a curve just below the NDP curve. And then the current projections of growth for 2016-17 to 2017-18 to 2021-22 lie below, so showing that the growth rates are increasingly coming down. The committee notes that in the medium term, growth is projected to accelerate, but a lower rate compared to the NDP projection. The projected growth in the medium term is premised on the anticipated revival of the private sector through improved access to credit and ongoing public infrastructure investment that is intended to reduce the cost of doing business. In addition, increased activity in the oil sector following the issuance of the oil production licenses are all intended to improve the growth prospects. The projected growth will be affected by the uncertain global environment, lower international global commodity prices, regional market uncertainty, climate change effects, and slow execution of the public infrastructure, given the usual binding constraints in policy implementation that have not been worked on. The low growth threat notwithstanding, the committee recommends that the government should remain committed to a faster execution of all planned investment projects to guarantee and stimulate the projected economic growth. Annual inflation. The committee notes that tight monetary policy has helped contain core inflation within the Bank of Uganda range. The inflation forecasts continue to indicate a manageable inflation rate. The projected inflation targets are premised on changes in domestic food prices, stability of the exchange rate, and international commodity prices. The committee notes that the unfavorable weather conditions affecting agricultural production, strengthening of the US dollar, and rise in interest rates in the US, and projected rise in import prices, leading to a deteriorated trade balance, may warrant monetary tightening to deal with inflation, which could last for longer episodes if conditions do not abate. The committee recommends that monetary authorities should continue to closely monitor all factors that trigger inflation and respond in a timely manner to contain inflation and its adverse effects. On the supply side of the economy, the drivers of the envisaged medium-term growth, i.e. agriculture towards manufacturing, trade, and construction, should be vigorously pursued for sustainable economic resilience against any potential risks. Unemployment. The committee observes that according to the Uganda National Household Survey of 2012-2013, unemployment in Uganda stood at 9.4%. However, according to the National Household and Population Census of 2014, unemployment among the youth was higher at 67.5%, as opposed to 21.3% reported in the BFP. In addition, agricultural sector employs the highest labor force in the country, implying that the structure of the economy has remained agricultural-based. The committee notes that stagnation in structural transformation towards manufacturing is resulting from limited skills in the labor market. While the Youth Livelihood Program has benefited over 80,000 youth, they are still in the agricultural or trade sectors, which require less skilled labor force and hence unable to trigger socio-economic transformation. The committee recommends that government should prioritize programs that have a different impact or that have a direct impact on youth employment. A review of the national curriculum should be urgently undertaken to ensure that the emphasis is put towards practical skills. The committee noted with appreciation growing trends in the provision of infrastructure for vocational training. The committee recommends that in order to address the problem of youth unemployment countrywide, shillings 15 billion be availed to provide for more bursaries to students aspiring for vocational and technical education. The committee visited Namamve Industrial Park, and they noted that a number of projects which were allocated land have been delayed for lack of infrastructure, such as access roads, electricity, water and wastewater treatment facilities, and drainage. Uganda Investment Authority has for many years not had the resources to provide this infrastructure. The committee recommends that the Uganda Electricity Transmission Company urgently establishes the required 132 kVA power substation at Namamve to address the immediate energy needs. In addition, 50 billion Uganda shillings be provided for the establishment of the drainage system and the remaining road infrastructure in Namave. In the medium term, government should identify and develop a new industrial park nearby Kampala to accommodate incoming investors. These measures will unlock the potential of creating employment opportunities for many of our educated and uneducated human resources. Private sector credit. The committee notes that the private sector credit projection of 13.8% of GDP in 2017-18 is desirable to drive the rise in economic growth from 5 to 6% over the medium term. This is only possible if monetary policy easing continues and implementation of the public investment program generates the desired growth dividends envisaged in the domestic economy. The committee notes that despite government policy to reduce domestic borrowing, which for a long time has had the crowding out effect on private sector credit due to high interest rates arising from the high treasury bill rate, government's domestic financing in 2017 will take an upward trend. The BFP indicates that net domestic borrowing will increase from 5.3 trillion shillings to 7.7 trillion shillings between 2016 and 2017-18 respectively. The committee recommends that government should strictly adhere to the local content policy. In addition, there's need to put more effort to combat levels of corruption that has eroded economic gains in the implementation of government programs. The government should pursue efforts for external concessional borrowing, as well as strengthen tax administration as alternative measures to domestic borrowing. The exchange rate. The committee notes that the exchange rate is projected to depreciate by 2.6% to an average rate of Uganda shilling 3,533 per US dollar. The stability of the exchange rate over the medium term will largely be driven by expected improvement in inflows from exports, NGO sector, offshore portfolio investors, and FDI to the oil sector. However, should the above materialize, there could be an upward appreciation of the exchange rate, which could hamper export growth. On the contrary, should the above not materialize, especially with stagnated export growth, volatility of the portfolio investments, and delay in oil-related infrastructure, the depreciation over the medium term could be larger and feed into the inflation levels. The committee recommends that the monetary authorities should timely intervene into the foreign exchange markets to ensure stability. In addition, more resources should be provided to promote export growth as a sure means of foreign exchange earning that will guarantee a strong trade balance. Interest rates. Madam Speaker, the committee observes that the weighted average lending rate for shilling-denominated loans declined to 23.1% in November 2016 from a peak of 25.2% in February 2016. While that of foreign currency denominated loans has risen from 9% in January 2016 to 10.1% in November 2016. The committee is concerned that the interest rates remain high and linked with a rise in non-performing loans that doubled in 2015-16 to 8% of total loans. As a result, credit conditions will stagnate to an average of 13% of GDP. In the absence of long-term capital for private sector investments, economic growth performance over the medium term will continue below potential levels. The committee recommends that government should consider expediting pension reforms and adequate recapitalization of Uganda Development Bank. The allocation of shillings 50 billion to UDB is a welcome gesture, but is still too small to generate the necessary impact in private sector growth. The committee recommends that the interest rates for long-term capital at UDB should be regulated by the government. In any case, not to exceed 12% per annum. Furthermore, priority areas to be funded by UDB shall be determined by government. In addition, government should promote financial literacy programs that address the importance of savings for investment as a means of promoting economic growth. The National Development Strategy implementation, paragraph 47. The committee notes that financial year 2017 is the third year of implementation of the NDP2, and the economy is supposed to have registered a high economic growth rate, a growth rate of 6.4%, but instead it is projected to grow at 5.5%. The committee observes that the economy has faced a number of shocks, including uncertain global environment, regional uncertainty, lower international commodity prices, climate change effects, and deceleration in the execution of public infrastructure investment that have slowed down economic growth below the NDP proposed levels. The economy grew by 4.8% during 15-16 and is projected to grow by 5% in 2016-17, which is lower than the targets envisaged under NDP2. It is important to note that when you factor in population growth, per capita growth only hovers around 2%, which is far below what is needed to attain the middle income status. The committee recommends that sectors should develop PPP frameworks or inventories in line with NDP objectives so as to guide and attract potential investors in PPP projects. Recent developments and impact on the medium-term macroeconomic framework. The committee observes that the outlook for 2016-17 points towards a widening current account deficit from 5.8% in 2015-16 to 7.1% of GDP. The deterioration of the external position results partly from a projected rise in imports for infrastructure development from 18.3% of GDP to a projected 19% of GDP, while exports are projected to stagnate at 10.8% of GDP in 2016-17. This has resulted into the worsening of the trade balance from 7.7% in financial year 2015-16 to a projected 8.2% of GDP. The committee recommends that due to the need to maintain macroeconomic stability, government will have to restrain its expenditure in financial year 2017-18. This can be attained through a fiscal contraction by adjusting the recurrent expenditure while maintaining the country's investment program. The committee notes that inflation expectations are projected to remain within single-digit levels of 5.4%, despite drought conditions experienced by the country during the financial year 2016-17. The committee recommends that with a favorable inflation outlook, the central bank should plan to continue its monetary easing program, as previously demonstrated in the reduction of the central bank rate from 13% in October 2016 to 12% in December 2016. The committee notes that while Treasury bill rates have continued to decline across all tenors in the financial year 2016-17, the reduction in the CBR has been slow to transmit to lending rates, partly reflecting tightening of lending standards and asymmetry in the transmission of monetary policy. Since the success of monetary policy depends on fiscal policy implementation, the committee recommends that the fiscal and monetary authorities should endeavor to harmonize their programs to guarantee positive outcome. The committee is concerned that although the level of domestic arrears stood at 3.2% of GDP by end of June 2016, government is slow at clearing them. There's a possibility of a recurrence and accumulation of domestic arrears despite the commitment control system which was adopted by government. The accumulation of domestic arrears constrained private sector growth. Although government is commended for undertaking that arrear repayments will take first call of the budget, it was not indicated how much has been accrued as domestic arrears. However, the Auditor General in his report for the year ended 30th June 2016 indicated that domestic arrears had continued to escalate at 62% from shillings 1.39 trillion in financial year 2013-14 to shillings 2.25 trillion, of which 0.561 billion is for pension arrears and shillings 1.692 billion is for other forms of domestic arrears. Therefore, the shillings 110 billion projected to be cleared in financial year 2017-18 is unreasonably inadequate. Apart from arrears to local suppliers, it is imperative to note that there are huge arrears accruing from court awards and human rights tribunal awards. For instance, the Auditor General in his report for the year ended 30th June 2016 indicated that outstanding amounts in court awards, compensations and other liabilities totaled to Uganda shillings 684 billion as of 30th June 2016. This is an increment of 1,166% from Uganda shillings 54 billion to 684 billion shillings over the last 5 years. The committee recommends, 1, that the national budget framework paper should always indicate the total outstanding domestic arrears as a basis of making allocations for their clearance. 2, that accounting officers who have committed government beyond the funds appropriated for given activity in flouting the commitment control system should be held responsible and personally accountable as required under Section 45(5) of the Public Finance Management Act. Number 3, local suppliers should be paid in time so as to enable them meet their loan requirements, boost consumer demand, and tax revenue growth. I turn to the medium-term fiscal framework, revenue policy measures. Given the limited revenue options, there is no scope for tax rate reductions or increases in financial year 2017-18. Despite implementation of various revenue policy measures, the committee observes that trends in net URA corrections as a percentage of GDP have remained stagnant to some degree. The net URA corrections as a percentage of GDP slightly grew from 10.33% in financial year 2011-12 to 13.3% in 2015-16. There are 3 main reasons for this stagnation: the large informal sector that constitutes 43% of GDP, the narrow tax base composed of a few taxpayers, coupled with a weak tax exemption regime and weaknesses in tax administration. The committee notes that domestic revenues are projected to increase in each of the next 5 fiscal years. In 2017-18, domestic revenue collections are projected at 14.5 trillion, of which NTR is 403 billion. And this is a 12.3% increase on the projected outturn of 12.9 trillion in the current financial year. It is projected to rise to 16.6 trillion in 2018-19 and further to 24.1 trillion by 2021-22. The projected revenue to GDP ratio of 15% by financial year 2021-22 will still be 10 percentage points lower than the convergence criteria as per the East African Community Monetary Union Protocol threshold of 25%. However, the projections above will be driven by reforms in the tax system and efficiency in tax administration, and will require investments in equipment and human resources in the medium to long term revenue mobilization efforts will focus on strengthening tax administration and compliance of taxpayers. The committee recommends that the government immediately reviews tax exemptions, widen the tax base, persistently improve tax administration in order to ensure growth in domestic revenue collections over the medium term. The committee observed that in 2017-18, Uganda Revenue Authority has been allocated an indicative additional allocation of 90 billion shillings to strengthen tax administration and compliance measures. These measures have been listed on page 22. You may read them on your own because they are very important. I now turn to expenditure, paragraph 70. The committee notes that expenditure and lending is projected to increase from 19.8 trillion to shillings 23.4 trillion in financial year 2017-18, and this is equivalent to 22.7% of GDP, and will average 20.5% of GDP for the medium term. In 2017-18, expenditure excluding net lending is projected at 21.5 trillion shillings, which is an increase of 17.9% above the projected outturn of 19.8 trillion in the current financial year 2016-17. Government's interest payments are projected at Uganda shillings 2.7 trillion next financial year, of which 2.0 trillion is interest on domestic securities, treasury bills and bonds, and the rest is interest on external debt. It should be noted that interest payments due rose by 22% between 2015 and 16 and 2016-17. Interest payments due are projected to rise by 35% in financial year 2017-18 compared to this financial year. The fiscal deficit. The committee notes that the fiscal deficit is projected to widen from 5.79 trillion in 2016-17, and this is 6.2% of GDP, to shillings 7.513 trillion, which is 7.3% of GDP in 2017-18, resulting from the huge government spending in the coming financial year. Domestic financing is projected to grow by 118.2% from shillings 670 billion in 2016-17 to shillings 1.477 trillion, largely to finance oil-related road infrastructure in 2017-18. The committee notes that this is a well-intentioned expenditure, although with the potential risks of hiked interest rates and slow private sector growth. The committee notes that private sector credit is projected to decline to 13.2% of GDP in 2016-17 from 13.5% of GDP in the previous 2015-16 financial year. In addition, although in the medium term, the deficit will be financed largely by external financing, in line with the government strategy of reducing domestic financing, the BFP fiscal deficit projections indicate that fiscal deficit will stand at 3.4% of GDP, which is above the Charter of Fiscal Responsibility and the ESC monetary convergence criteria of 3% of GDP. The committee recommends that government should adopt austerity measures geared towards minimizing resource wastage, as well as promoting efficient use of resources in order to meet the Charter of Fiscal Responsibility and ESC monetary criteria threshold on a fiscal deficit. The committee notes that the gross debt projections indicate that external debt in nominal terms will rise to average 30% of GDP, while domestic debt will average 12% of GDP over the medium term. And this will exert pressure on government to ensure efficient implementation, and that returns are generated to sustain the country's economic growth. Government's fiscal expansion in 2016-17 will be financed by the rise in foreign loan disbursements, especially with development budget. The current account will be financed by rise in financial account, hence generating a surplus in the balance of payments of about $20 million for reserve accumulation. The committee observes that while government and IMF debt sustainability analysis indicate a low risk of debt distress for Uganda, at the same time, it points to increased vulnerabilities. The committee recommends that government addresses the vulnerability to export shocks and ensure growth dividends from the projects financed by the public debt. The resource envelope for 2017-18. The committee observes that the projected total inflow, excluding appropriation in aid, for financial year 2017-18 will increase by 17.7%, majorly owing to an increase in net domestic financing, which we normally call domestic borrowing, and increased domestic revenues. Budget support will decline by 892.9 billion shillings, an equivalent loss of 1% of GDP. However, project support will grow by 21.9% or by 0.7% of GDP, implying that the donor community is progressively moving away from budget support. The projected growth in total resource inflow outstrips the projected growth in the economy. Resource inflow will increase from 26% of GDP in 2016-17 to 29.2% of GDP in 2017-18. We shall refer to Table 2. External debt repayment will increase from 0.2% of GDP in 2016-17 to 0.9 in 2017-18. The domestic resource inflow will grow by 22%, moving from a percentage share of 71% of total inflows in 2016 to a share of 73.6% in 2017-18. The declining trend of the percentage share of the external resource in the total resource inflow is consistent and in line with the country's overarching goal of self-reliance. On page 25, we present the resource envelope estabulated, and it's important to appreciate the contents of this table. Looking at column 4 gives you the projections for 2017-18. Domestic revenue, we're expecting domestic revenue amounting to 14.5 trillion. We are also expecting external support in form of budget support amounting to 33.8 billion during 17-18. Not domestic financing, borrowing. This is the domestic borrowing. This is going to increase from 5.3 trillion to 7.7 trillion. And of which domestic refinancing is going to be 6.2 trillion on account of the existing debt stock. Project support, as I mentioned earlier, is increasing from 6.5 trillion to 7.9 trillion. So we have a total resource inflow of 30.23 trillion shillings. However, having had that resource, we have to offset external debt repayment amounting to 915.8 billion, and the resource envelope reduces to 29.3 trillion. Again, we offset domestic arrears payment. Remember, this is what we are providing, 110 billion out of the 2.5 trillion I mentioned earlier, and that will reduce the available resource envelope to 29.2 trillion. And then when you offset project support of 7.9 trillion, we remain with 21.2 trillion. And when you offset domestic refinancing from the existing debt stock, of 6.2 trillion, and you offset our interest payments, commitments of 12.7 trillion. The available government of Uganda resource envelope is 12.2 trillion. That is the money that is available for 2017-18. Our nominal GDP, as you note, is now at 2017-18 is projected at 100.4 trillion. The committee notes that discretionary resources available for government expenditure will grow by 4.6% from 11.7 trillion in financial year 2016 to 12.253 in 2017-18, hence an increase in available resources by only 540.2 billion shillings. So that is the amount of money that we have. When you talk about our expenditure needs, you need to put into account what is available. The Table 3 summarizes the resource inflow by source, whether domestic or external. And you note that domestic resources will constitute 73.6% of the total resource, while external resources will constitute 26.4% in 2017-18. Our sectoral priorities for financial year 2017-18. The committee notes that the total budget allocation is projected to grow by 9.8% in the financial year 2017-18. However, the share of GDP, total expenditure, will drop from 21.8% to 21.7% in 2017-18. The highest growth in allocation is projected in the ICT sector by 62.6%, followed by land, housing and urban development, 48.1%, interest payment growing by 35.4%, works and transport growing by 27.3%, energy and mineral development growing by 26.3%, and security sector by 23.3%. On the other hand, there will be decline in the following sector allocations. Health, it will reduce by 29.6%. Justice, law and order it will reduce by 13.9%, and social development, it will reduce by 10.4%. The details are in Table 4. The committee noted that the budget priorities for 2017-18 included the construction of oil roads, the food production and productivity, export promotion through value addition, and enhancement of revenue collection. Works, I would like, Madam Speaker, to focus on a few sectors that have received additional resources. Works and transport interventions. The committee noted that government has allocated additional funds to Uganda National Roads Authority amounting to 1,122.62 billion to cater for the construction of roads under the Hoima Wanseko project. It was clarified, however, that the Hoima Wanseko project comprised of 15 roads as indicated in Table 5 below. The committee noted with concern that the additional allocation of 1,122.6 billion to UNRA for 2017-18 is excessive, given the usual absorption challenges associated with lengthy procurement process in the country. Apart from 2 roads, Hoima Butiaba Wanseko and Rusalira Nkonge Sembabule, the rest had neither the feasibility studies nor the detailed designs completed. The unity cost of construction per kilometer for Hoima Butiaba Wanseko Road of shillings 5.934 billion shillings per kilometer is far above the average cost, which requires UNRA to clarify further. The committee recommends that UNRA create separate projects for each road to enable effective monitoring and accountability for the resources allocated. The committee recommends further that the government should review the projected allocation to UNRA for 2017 with a view of coming up with a realistic amount which will be absorbed under the oil roads. This will free up resources for other constrained sectors. In the future, government should avoid raising people's expectations by indicating roads to be constructed in a budget when there is no capacity to do so. Some roads appear in the budget and later disappear without government's explanation. Yet such roads are critical in developing the country. And we gave some examples in the areas around Kampala of roads that have been appearing. So this time, we have asked UNRA to cost all the roads and present a separate schedule. I was supposed to have attached that schedule here, but somehow we did not attach it. But we now have the list of all roads, the costs, and the time frames provided to the committee. Agriculture interventions. The committee noted that NAD Secretariat was allocated an additional 27.53 billion for seeds and planting materials for beans, maize, cassava, cowpeas, and bananas. The committee observes that in the recent past, the management of seedlings distributed through NADS and OWC programs have faced major challenges of poor handling, registering a high loss of seedlings and low survival rates of just 58%. Honorable members, Madam Speaker, you will note this 27.5 billion is an increase coming on top of the usual budget of over 300 billion to NADS. To correct this problem, the committee recommends that part of the budget for seed inputs be reallocated to strengthening the agricultural extension services. Who should be responsible for quality assurance of the seedlings before payment is effected? The strategy of promoting locally based nursery beds should also be enhanced to avoid handling losses. On this particular one, NADS have been sending seedlings from long distances to be delivered in our villages. So we are saying, as a matter of policy, we should promote nursery beds within our localities, and the seedlings should be procured from there. In addition, the policy on supplying farm inputs should be reviewed by enabling farmers make a marginal contribution of 20% in order to make them attach greater value to the materials supplied to them. The committee further recommends that government should fast-track implementation of the National Agricultural Extension Policy and Strategy. Government should avail resources to local governments to operationalize the single spine extension system. You recall, honorable members, that various local governments have been recruiting staff under the single spine extension system. However, apart from salaries, these extension workers do not have facilitation funds to enable them move to deliver services. So we are recommending that an estimated budget provision of 39 billion is provided at least to 2 extension workers, 39 billion throughout the whole country to support 2 extension workers per sub-county by way of procuring a motorcycle and other operational funds to enable them meet farmers and give advice to them. Water and environment interventions. The committee observed that the irrigation intervention budget provisions are spread out in different sectors, yet with the common target of providing water for production. The irrigation funds are allocated to Ministry of Agriculture, Fisheries and Animal Resources, but also to Ministry of Water and Environment, and also to NADS. The committee recommends that instead of scattering irrigation resources in different sectors, government should pool all the resources under a competent body to effectively coordinate and manage the irrigation funds. In addition, government should first deseal all existing water valley tanks before embarking on construction of new ones. The committee noted that irrigation funds are proposed for the construction of valley tanks in some regions, mainly covering the water-stressed areas, and to support the already established irrigation schemes such as Oreny and Rwengaju. The committee noted that effects of climate change cut across the entire country. On the other hand, the entire country is covered with water bodies such as lakes, rivers, streams, and swamps that can be utilized for irrigation. The committee therefore recommends that irrigation interventions should be seen to be covering the entire country, not those isolated areas as it seems to be. The committee further recommends that government should provide the long-awaited irrigation policy and strategy to Parliament before the budget estimates for financial year 2017-18 are laid before Parliament. Given the gravity of the effects of frequent droughts in the country, the committee recommends that irrigation infrastructure should be part of our priority national infrastructure development program and should be reviewed annually and more resources allocated. The well-established irrigation infrastructure in the entire country will ensure an enhanced and sustainable GDP growth, improve production and productivity, create and stabilize jobs, ensure food security, and increase domestic earnings and savings. In order to ensure a sustainable irrigation intervention, the committee recommends that government should move to strengthen NEMA in order to restore and conserve all water resources, lakes, rivers, wetlands, and underground water. We noted that NEMA is significantly marginalized in terms of resources. Value addition. The committee noted that the Ministry of Science and Technology and Innovation was allocated an innovation fund amounting to 50 billion shillings. The committee was not able to obtain information pertaining to the operationalization, nature, and criteria of distribution of the innovation funds. The committee recommends that government tables to Parliament information about the innovation funds before the annual budget estimates for financial year 2017-18 are submitted to Parliament. Madam Speaker, the committee noted the allocation of 50 billion to Uganda Development Fund for capitalization of Uganda Development Bank, which is insufficient to have meaningful impact if private sector investment is to be revived. The committee recommends that an additional 50 billion should be provided for the recapitalization of Uganda Development Bank in 2017-18. The committee noted that an allocation of 20 billion has been earmarked to recapitalize UBC. The committee recommends that government should first address the current managerial and administrative challenges before recapitalizing the Uganda Broadcasting Corporation. Other general sector concerns: rent for government offices. Over the years, Parliament has recommended the rationalization of resource use by advising government to consider construction of buildings to house government MDAs. At one time, there was a presidential and cabinet position to centralize the management and allocation of funds towards the construction of government offices. Matters have been compounded by landlords charging rent in dollars, and with the fluctuating exchange rate, some MDAs have found themselves using almost all their non-wage allocation to pay rent, while others are in arrears and on the verge of being evicted. The committee therefore reiterates its previous recommendation that government should find a solution for office space for MDAs. A, by providing adequate resources to MDAs with land to kickstart construction of their homes in a phased manner using the allocations within the MTEF. And B, the Ministry of Lands should identify a suitable location for construction of office space enough to accommodate multiple government MDAs. The government common location will allow the concentration of government services at a single point for efficient service delivery to people, especially those that do not own any piece of land. This can build synergies among agencies. Government can draw examples from countries like Botswana, Malawi, Malaysia, that have established government enclaves. The committee noted that the Ministry of Defense budget has an excess allocation of 500 billion shillings that was erroneously provided. The committee recommends that this amount of 500 billion be removed from the MTEF. This money relates to AMSON for our troops in Somalia, so it was erroneously stated with an extra 500 billion. So we are recommending its removal. Unfortunately, we cannot allocate it to anyone because this is UN funds. Budget allocation to local governments. The committee noted that the allocation of resources to local governments in the medium term does not reflect the importance that government puts on fiscal decentralization as a mechanism of delivery to the citizens. The projected budget indicates a declining trend both in absolute terms as a share of total budget. In 2016-17, only 3% of the total budget was allocated to local governments. In 2017-18, it is even declining. Only 11% of the total budget is allocated to local government. The spirit of fiscal decentralization strategy was to give local governments autonomy and flexibility in budgeting to address issues and challenges that are unique to individual local governments, thereby improving service delivery. A study carried out by Uganda Local Government Commission in 2015 recommended that local governments, to effectively provide service delivery, 38% of the local budget should be allocated to local governments. The committee recommends that the government should scale up its allocation to local governments towards the recommended share of 38% of the national budget to ensure improved service delivery and the successful implementation of the fiscal decentralization strategy. Table 6 actually is a demonstration of how much is allocated to the local governments and the percentages thereon. Right, Honorable Speaker, based on the above, we have proposed some adjustments to the sectoral allocations as presented in Table 7. And it is important that I put these on the Hansard. Under the sector public administration, vote 206, our mission in Kenya, they have we are proposing to bridge the funding gap of 11 billion shillings for the completion of Uganda House in Kenya, which was actually condemned property, but this facility has the potential to increase our revenue 4 times. And vote 102, Electoral Commission, this is largely wage enhancement and providing for operational funds for their new offices in the new districts, amounting to 41.7 billion shillings. Honorable members, Madam Speaker, you will note that the wage structure for the Electoral Commission was set in 1999, and since then, they have not seen any salary increments. Accountability sector, Uganda Investment Authority, vote 008, 50 billion should be provided for construction of roads in Namamve Industrial Park. Again, Uganda Investment Authority, we propose 10 billion to acquire investment land within metropolitan Kampala to attract investment. Agriculture, vote 010, 14 billion as operational funds to facilitate extension workers for local governments and local government to implement the single spine system. I think the figure was 39 billion, a correction. Natural resources, National Environment Management Authority, NEMA, 6 billion to strengthen monitoring, supervision, and enforcement activities. Ministry of Water and Environment, 30 billion to increase water access in rural and urban areas. Uganda National Meteorological Authority, 5.2 billion to cover a wage shortfall for staff already in post. Energy and Mineral Development Sector, Ministry of Water and Environment, 8 billion counterpart funding under Greening Uganda for restoration of degraded and protection of ecosystem. We already have a loan towards that project. Rural Electrification Agency, again, 36 billion. This is counterpart funding for rural electrification projects. Social Development Sector, Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development, 10 billion to kickstart implementation of the Green Jobs and Fair Labour Market Program, and 2 billion to the Equal Opportunities Commission for purposes of gender and equity compliance assessment for all MDAs, including local governments. Uganda Development Corporation, 50 billion for capitalization of this corporation as the law mandates. The law mandates a capitalization of 500 billion, but because the budget cannot permit, we are proposing 50 billion shillings. Again, Uganda National Bureau of Standards, 6 billion to embark on the construction of our national laboratory. They do not have a building of their own, and they have been suffering for quite a while. Ministry of Trade and Industry, again, cooperatives, compensation of war debts, and revival of cooperatives across the country. And this is covering various cooperatives: Wamara Cooperative Union, Masaka, West and East Mengo, Bunyoro Cooperative, Busoga Lango, Maditeso, Bukedi, Mid-North Cooperative Unions, among others. Ministry of Trade and Industry, 12 billion for construction of regional silos and other storage facilities across the country to fight food insecurity, to mitigate food insecurity and speculative trading. Justice, Law and Order, Directorate of Government Analytical Laboratory, DIGAL, 2 billion to clear current sample backlog. Works and Transport, the Uganda Road Fund, to strengthen our capacity on Duka roads, maintenance, local government roads, emergency roads, new town councils, community access roads, the road fund, and road rehabilitation, a total of 100 billion shillings. Accountability Sector, Auditor General, 6 billion to audit Karuma and Isimba power projects, the comprehensive audit of NADS, and the audit of all PPPs and compensations. The auditing of PPPs is a requirement under the PPP Act, and the Auditor General has not been undertaking these audits. Public Sector Management, Ministry of Local Government, 2 billion for non-wage recurrent and to clear rent arrears. Ministry of Local Government, again, honoraria of 12 billion for sub-county councillors across the country. Madam Speaker, at the beginning, I begged for your indulgence not to present part 2. It's not that I'm tired. but I believe that you cannot stand another 2 hours of presentation from me. And I want to beg as follows. Right Honorable Speaker and Honorable Members, in accordance with Section 9(8) of the Public Finance Management Act, I move that the report of the Committee on the Budget Framework Paper for financial year 2017-18 to financial year 2021-22 be adopted, and the Budget Framework Paper be approved with the proposed amendments. The Minister of Finance, Planning and Economic Development shall lay on table the final version of the Budget Framework Paper incorporating those amendments for the financial year 2017-18 to 2021-22 before presenting the annual budget for financial year 2017-18. I beg to report. Thank you so much. Madam Speaker, I beg to lay on table the report of the Budget Committee on the National Budget Framework Paper for the financial year 2017-18 to 2021-22. Madam Speaker, I beg to lay on table the minutes of the Budget Committee on the same Budget Framework Paper. I beg to lay. Right Honorable Speaker, I was notified about the minority report from Honorable Kivumbi, Mwanga Kivumbi, who is a member of the committee. I received that notification before the report was released. So, with your indulgence, you can allow him to present that report.
Okay, Honorable Kivumbi. Okay, maybe before Honorable Kivumbi comes in, I've established that the land fund will be entirely on issues of opening boundaries, compensation, acquiring titles, so that land fund report will go to the Committee of Physical Infrastructure. Yes, Honorable Kivumbi.
Right Honorable Speaker, members of Parliament, let me first and foremost associate myself with the main report. To the large extent, almost 95%, I agree with the contents of the main report. So 5% I don't agree. Right Honorable Speaker, Section 9 of the Public Finance Management Act provides for preparation of the budget framework paper, its submission to Parliament, and consideration by the relevant committee. It is on this note that the National Budget Framework Paper was referred to the Committee on Budget. Pursuant of, I can leave that, because that is just areas of dissent. They are a number. They are: one, consistence with the Charter of Fiscal Responsibility; treasury operations; clearance of domestic areas; withdrawals from petroleum fund; payment to cooperatives; construction of valley dams; control of foot and mouth disease; construction of health facilities; national rollout of SAGE; government borrowing from pension fund; poor loan absorption, classified expenditures, State House scholarships, unrealistic absorption of oil roads, UBC funding, innovation fund, excess allocation to Ministry of Defense, construction of roads, streets, and highways, purchase of beef for slaughtering. Yes, yes, that's the way it is. Purchase of cattle for beef for slaughtering. I beg to amend. Charter of Fiscal Responsibility. The Charter of Fiscal Responsibility sets targets of reducing the fiscal balance to a deficit of no greater than 5% of GDP and maintaining public debt in net present value terms below 50% of GDP by 2020-21. On 22nd December 2016, Parliament approved the Charter of Fiscal Responsibility. Section 5, subsection 2 of the Public Finance Management Act requires that the Minister of Finance publishes the Charter of Fiscal Responsibility within 1 month after approval by Parliament. Further, Section 9, subsection 3 of the Public Finance Management Act requires the Minister to ensure that the budget framework paper is consistent with the Charter of Fiscal Responsibility. To date, no approved Charter of Fiscal Responsibility has ever been published, hence the budget framework paper is inconsistent with the Charter of Fiscal Responsibility. The main report only shied away from making this bold recommendation that I want to advocate for. It said it was constrained because this is the dictate of the law. Given the fact that in line with Section 9, subsection 4 of the Public Financial Management Act, Parliament is only expected to approve and not to reject. The budget framework paper should be approved with the following conditions. A, in line with Section 28, subsection 1 of the Public 78, subsection 1 of the Public Finance Management Act, Parliament suspends consideration of the budgetary framework paper until the Minister of Finance, Planning and Economic Development makes a report with an explanation why the budget framework paper is inconsistent with the Charter of Fiscal Responsibility. 2, in line with Section 58, subsection 2, 78, subsection 2 of the Public Finance Management Act, it is established that the Minister of Finance, Planning and Economic Development failed to ensure consistency with the budget framework paper with the Charter of Fiscal Responsibility due to negligence or misconduct of the public officer. The public officer shall be held liable within Section 79(1) up to N of the Act. Treasury obligations. Vote 130. Treasury operations was established with a mandate to effectively and efficiently manage the government's statutory debt obligations. Investment and contingency fund. The vote seeks to undertake the following. A, create and maintain a high quality and updated database. 2, and a portfolio. This is B. C, requisition for external resources, stroke disbursement on timely basis. D, pay government statutory debt obligations when they follow due. E, administration of the contingency fund. F, provide financial and accounting guidelines in the management of government investments. G, produce domestic and external debt service and disbursement projections. In financial year 2017-18, government intends to undertake interest payment of 2.78 trillion. Domestic refinancing is 6.25 trillion. External debt repayment is 915.8 billion, and domestic area repayment of 110 billion. Although by these undertaking and the allocations are managed by Treasury Operation Office, they are not reflected in the budget allocations and medium-term projection of vote 130. Treasury Operations. To the contrary, only 100 billion is reflected as proposed allocation to vote 130. Treasury Operations, as a consequence, it is not a true reflection of the funds being managed by the vote, hence continued management failures. So we want that vote to reflect the full extent of the money they will manage under Treasury Operations for easy follow-up. It is important to note that in the financial year ending 30th June 2014 and 15, the Auditor General, in his report on Treasury Operations, noted the following concerns that are still ongoing. A, increase in unsustainable increase of direct charge of consolidated fund arising from mandamus orders by court, negatively impacting on the availability of funds for government programs. B, inadequate internal audit to appraise the available internal control, improved risk management process, and to provide assurance on the value for money in line in the administration and operations of the program in the vote. C, unsupported budget movements from external debt principal repayment to clear domestic interest. These were noted by the Auditor General. Payment being made beyond the agreed installments reflected in a memorandum of understanding between the Ministry of Justice and Constitutional Affairs and would-be beneficiaries. All funds regarding interest repayment, domestic refinancing, domestic external debt repayment, and domestic area repayment should be reflected in the budget allocations and medium-term projection of vote 1-3 of the Treasury Operations. Indicative proposals, that's a repetition. Clearance of domestic areas. The stock domestic areas has increased from 1.54 trillion in the financial year 13-14 to 2.7 trillion in the financial year 15-16. This increment is attributed to pension and gratuity areas, court awards, and compensation areas. Of the 2.7 trillion, government has failed to pay civil servants who are demanding for areas of salaries equal to 996 billion. These are simply areas of civil servants. Pension and gratuity mounting to 597 billion. Right Honorable Speaker, these are humble, poor people in our villages who did decent work and are not being paid their due. These people once paid, none of them is likely to go and buy perfume.
Why can't you read the report for today?
Hey, why do you fear for me to make a comment or two? You want me to stick to a report? Not to make comments. Okay, Right Honorable Speaker, I'll stick to the report. Right Honorable Speaker, when you look down this table, you see government failing to accumulating areas in utility, rent, salary, compensation, and others. My keen interest is on pension, on gratuity, and salary areas. These are very poor people in our villages. They need their money. As part of revamping the economy, government committed itself that areas repayment will take first call. This is in what is in the budget framework paper. But to our dismay, only 110 billion is proposed for repayment domestic areas against a stock of 2.7 trillion. Right, Honorable Speaker, that's why I'm proposing a modest proposal that 50% of the stock of domestic areas mounting to 1.14 trillion is cleared in the next financial year. This will spur revenue growth, motivate civil servants, facilitate public for improved productivity and increased availability of disposable income for enhanced economic growth. Withdrawals from the petroleum fund. For the resource envelope of this financial year, the budget framework paper does not indicate any resources from the petroleum fund, nor does it indicate the status of the petroleum fund and its expenditures, nor does it indicate the ceiling of the total budget funding from petroleum holding account. Furthermore, the Minister of Finance failed to table an annual report on the petroleum fund in Parliament by 31st December, hence violating Section 61(1)(b) of the Public Finance Management Act. Given the fact that the resource envelope does not include petroleum fund, no fund, therefore, should be withdrawn from the petroleum fund. In line with Section 78(1) of the Public Finance Management Act, the Minister of Finance, Planning and Economic Development should within 1 week make a report to Parliament with an explanation why the annual report on the petroleum fund was not tabled. Cooperatives development. Government indicated that cooperative societies will be revived as one of the strategic interventions in the agriculture sector in financial year 17-18. However, to the contrary, in the financial year 17-18 budget, government is to constrain cooperative development by reallocating 2.9 billion to improve private sector competitiveness. Furthermore, government still owes 17 traditional cooperative union outstanding compensation claims mounting to 53.9 billion. I put an annex. As a consequence, several traditional cooperatives are financially constrained to meet their growth needs. This undermines the contribution of cooperatives, particularly towards collective bargain for farmers, accessibility to improved farm inputs, bargaining for favorable prices, identifying markets for farm produce, and establishing and stabilizing volatile processes for agricultural produce. Outstanding claims owed to cooperative unions mounting to 53.9 billion be cleared this financial year, so as to financially boost the cooperatives to meet their growth needs. Right Honorable Speaker, construction of new dams. The committee has noted that we halt construction of new dams, and I agree. I had carried this opinion before they made that concession in the committee, that we all agree that before they go for the construction of new dams, the money that has been allocated be shifted to go towards desilting the already existing dams in the country. A control of foot and mouth disease. During drought spells, spread of foot and mouth disease is rampant and difficult to contain in coffee corridor areas such as Nakasongola, Mubende, Sembabula, among others. This is attributed to the fact that communally grazed livestock move extensively in search of water and pasture. Unfortunately, the Ministry of Agriculture has a shortfall of 4 billion to purchase and administer adequate vaccine doses. Therefore, I advocate that the 4 billion that the Agriculture Ministry lacks for this purpose be allocated. Right Honourable Speaker, construction of health facilities. In the medium term, the Ministry of Health proposed to revamp and make functional all health centers 4s, including upgrading health center 3s and 4s in the counties where they do not exist. 90% of the counties in Uganda have health center 4s. 206 counties out of 290 in Uganda, while 29 do not have health center 3s. Upgrading health center 3s requires 166 trillion, hence 5.5 billion per health center 4. Right Honourable Speaker, we are questioning. There are also plans to construct health center 3s in 93 sub-counties and have no public health facilities. This will require 247 billion, hence 2.6 billion per health center 3 for just construction. Besides the cost being exorbitant, construction of the new facilities indicate poor prioritization for the most of the health facilities are operating below capacity due to staffing, equipment, and drug shortfalls. This is our position, that we halt the construction of new health facilities in the medium term, and the funds be geared towards ensuring that all existing health facilities operate at full capacity in terms of staffing, equipment, and drugs. Right Honourable Speaker, we also find 2.6 billion to construct a health center too. Highly exorbitant. Just construction of a health center too. These are very small construction holdings. Health center 3 for 2.6 billion each, just construction, is highly very, that's highly very exorbitant. And we therefore ask the ministry to avail 140 billion for that. For all of the national siege, construction only, Honourable Speaker, just construction, 2.6, health center 3, that is high. And for construction of health center 4, 5.6 billion each, just construction. We find that really untenable. And that's why, and this is for a loan facility we have already approved in this parliament. Yes, I know. Government, national rollout of SAGE. In the financial year 17-16, Parliament resolved that SAGE be rolled out countrywide so as to increase equity, support, and empower all the elderly in Uganda. 11.6 billion should be availed to roll out SAGE to cover 100% elderly persons in every sub-county in Uganda. The committee recommended a rollout, yes, but they never recommended that the money should consequently move in that direction. My only intervention is that the money should be availed. Borrowing from pension funds. Right, the intention of government to liberalize pension funds purposely to raise funds for fund long-term investment is of great concern. The funds are meant to guarantee the future of contributors, not necessarily long-term investments of government. Therefore, it is not prudent for government to highlight pension funds as its alternative long-term financing sources. Besides, government is proved to be poor of debt repayment. Government's presumed assumption that funds are redundant is misconceived. The intention of the contributor has never been to complement funding of government, but to secure their future retirement. If the custodians of the pension funds are to consider lending, let them consider lending to the owners, the savers, and not government. Poor loan absorption. The ministry, the majority of loans were approved over 2 years ago, but their total disbursement have performed at a mere 26%, a reduction from 28% as of December 15. This highlights poor absorption rising from inadequate preparation, and projects being funded are not of a development priority. This leads to constraints of low-cost spending and subdued growth, especially in sectors with low absorption capacity. There is also an increased trend of acquiring non-concessional loans that are commercial in nature for projects with no immediate financial return or profit. Right, Honorable Speaker, down here we have put a table that indicates a sector-by-sector rate of absorption. Parliament should not consider any new loan request for any sector or MDA whose total absorption of loan is less than 50%. This will curb poor preparation and funding of non-priority development projects. The table is there, is very discouraging. Right, Honorable Speaker, classified expenditure. I'm glad to note that you have already preempted this by appointing members to those committees that, yes, and I hope the chairman did not smuggle. I saw him, so I will not go for classified expenditure because the recommendation, you have already fulfilled it. Now, I go to Roads Fund. Although it was indicated that additional funding of 112 trillion will be allocated to the construction of Hoima, Butaba, Wanseko Road. The committee was later informed by UNRA that the funds were also meant for 14 priority oil roads. Of the 15 oil roads, only 2 roads had undertaken feasibility studies and detailed designs. Therefore, it is not possible for the remaining 13 roads to absorb funds in the next financial year, mounting to a total of 851 billion. This would further stretch the fiscal deficit. The 2 roads that were indicated to have feasibility studies and detailed designs include what I've already said. Zimbabwe. Now, in the financial year, it was proposed that roads be allocated 303 billion and 160 billion respectively. It is interesting to note that each of that road is going to cost approximately 6 billion per kilometer. 6 billion approximately, because it's 500 and 500 billion point something. Tamaking, Right Honorable Speaker, this, at this rate, this will be the most expensive road in the world. Therefore, Right Honorable Speaker, our proposal is that 851 billion should be reallocated from oil roads without feasibility studies and detailed designs to fund other priority budget items. Because, Right Honorable Speaker, the only money we can pass as Parliament should go towards road design and feasibility studies. It's all upon that they can estimate the level of debt they need. But for us to give them money and say, there you are, go. UBC funding, I agree with
They will send it to a fixed deposit.
to generate interest. Road UBC funding, I agree with the position of the committee, and I will not further elaborate. The innovation fund, I'd put something to it, but I agree with the position of the committee. Excessive allocation to the Ministry of Defense. Right Honorable Speaker, this was a contentious issue because I sit both in the Committee of Defense and on budget. We had to struggle that this money be properly traced. But I will want to correct the impression, the figures being given here, for us to deduct the right figure. The excess, the money allocated were 879.983 billion. Money from AMISOM will be 321.285 billion. That leaves for money, I don't know if the minister says it is available, we shall have an excess of 500 billion to reallocate. If they say they don't have it, we shall have to deduct from the budget allocation 558.698 billion. So, Chair, in your report, you are proposing to deduct only 500. We will lose 58 billion. So I beg to correct that figure, that it is over and above, an extra 50 billion will be lost. So the deductions will be 558 billion. If you do a quick math. Honorable Speaker, there is money. I'm jumping roads for highway because it was clear in the report. Purchase of beef, of cattle for beef for slaughter. Shilling 30.68 billion is proposed to be allocated to the Ministry of Agriculture, Animal Industry and Fisheries in the next financial year for promotion of priority animal products and productivity. These funds are meant for purchase of high-quality animals for the abattoirs, for beef slaughter for export. Right Honorable Speaker, these abattoirs are a private venture. There is no locus as to why we must allocate 30 billion to finance the purchase of cattle that are fattened for beef slaughter. I mean, this is a private venture, pure. Why should we allocate our public mega resources there when you have deficits? The committee failed to establish whether government entered the slaughtering PPP agreement and supply of high-quality animals in its principal contribution. Further, the ministry does not have a slaughtering business. Hence, the country will not attain a return on investment or profit on animals supplied by the ministry for slaughtering. Therefore, 4 billion of the 30 billion should be reallocated to fund food and mouth disease other than going there. The rest should be reallocated. Right Honorable Speaker, State House scholarship. Parliament has over the years, to no avail, requested for a criteria used to select beneficiaries under the State House scholarship scheme. As a consequence, the 9th Parliament resolved to discontinue the scheme. While considering the National Budget Framework Paper 2016-18, Parliament resolved that State House sponsorship scheme be gradually phased out and the funds put into the Higher Education Institution Funding Scheme as provided for in the Higher Education Student Funding Scheme Act. However, it is proposed that in the next financial year, 7,500 students are to benefit from the Presidential Scholarship Scheme. Right Honorable Speaker, I was lucky. When I challenged this figure, the chairperson of the Presidential Committee called the State House and volunteered more details to this effect. We realized that State House is still paying for students in the primary schools. There is a UPE program. Why should public money go where there is a UPE program? We established that State House still pays money for secondary school education. There is USE. We established that money still goes to students in tertiary institutions. Madam Speaker, we established that 4,000 students are on government State House scholarship in universities. Now the question is, each year government only sponsors 4,000 students countrywide in all institutions of higher learning, and there is no criteria for this kind of scheme. Therefore, Right Honorable Speaker, I beg to move this House that we reject a budgetary line that is meant to go towards this scheme. With that, Right Honorable Speaker, I beg to move.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair of the Budget Committee and all your members, including the Minority Report. I just have some clarifications I need from the government. One, if it is true that we are going to import beef to export, how can we promote the economy of another country and then pretend that this beef made in Uganda? Is that what we are doing as a country? Why don't we buy seed animals and supply the country so that we can grow on beef? Secondly, honourable members, listening to the chair, I realized that the Minister of Finance has not given us an update on how the Sustainable Development Goals fit into this budget. When you have a situation, and the chair was, I think, being very diplomatic, he said health has reduced by 29%. He didn't tell us what is left. Is it 2%? Is it 3%? How are we going to meet SDG goal number 3 on health if we're making no provision? I also want to know, how can we keep money floating? 15 roads, are they going to start this year and be completed? Is that possible? Why don't you give the money to the water people who need ferries? You could pay for our ferries as you wait for the 15 roads. And you can't do 15 roads in 1 year. It's not possible. Not even starting. Not even starting. So, Chair, Honourable Minister, I want an update on the SDGs, because we resolved here in September that when you bring the budget framework paper, you brief us how it meets the SDGs. You are completely silent on that one, and we want answers about it. So also assure us about the 15 roads and where the money is going. And really, it's a shame if we are going to support, we are supporting the Chinese economy now, want to support the Brazilian economy when we have no jobs in this country. You know, you wanted to make some comments, Honorable Minister. Members, do you have some things to say? Okay, Rafael Songa, 333. Rafael Songa, Beatrice, okay, I'll come like this, 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I talk on the sector of local government and public service. Recently, you received a delegation from the sub-county councillors, and they appealed to you to redress their really bad situation. I'd like to thank the committee for making a provision of 12 billion for allowances for the sub-county councillors. It is a humble beginning, about 30,000 per month for these councillors, but I think it reflects a good spirit from Parliament. And I'd like to request that if the final budget does not reflect this 12 billion, then we should put our foot down and say no. In the same vein, I would like to appeal to Parliament to consider a waiver on the allowances of the district councillors. They are getting only 250,000, and this is taxed every month. Madam Speaker, I think even if we don't increase this year, but if we said for the time being, government should suspend a tax on this councillors' allowance. Thirdly, Madam Speaker, the local government budget. It's good that the committee has highlighted the decline in the percentage share of the budget that goes to local governments. 10 years ago, the budget that went to local governments was 30% of the national budget. Progressively, it has gone down, down, down. Now we are talking of 11%. Madam Speaker, this is really, I don't know, but it is inconsistent with the government commitment to devolve powers and services to local governments. 80% of the primary health care, rural water, and so on, these services required by ordinary people, they are served or provided by the local governments. How can we provide them with only 10% of the national budget? Why are the ministries interested in keeping the national resource themselves? Madam Speaker, my proposal is, with effect from this year, next year, 5% should be added on the district budgets every year, until we at least get to 20-25%. And you look at even the unconditional grant. Colleagues, you have the Constitution. The very last page of the National Constitution, Schedule 7, provides a formula for the unconditional grant. The district unconditional grant is not supposed to go down when there is an increase in the general price level of commodities. It's a shame for the government to say inflation has been there by about 5%, and yet you decrease, you cut the district unconditional grant. It is totally unconstitutional. So we need really to put our foot down and say the district grants, the district transfers every year. Minister of Finance, make sure there is a 5% increase. I want to propose, Madam Speaker, that we take up this issue of fiscal planning in view of the urbanization. Uganda cannot be different from other countries. The future of Uganda is...
Songa, then Rakimari.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Speaker. And the honorable members. First of all, I want to really question ourselves. How can we promote agricultural productivity when we don't have good health? So health must be given a priority in order to address agriculture, in order to address education, in order to address even other sectors of the economy. I see in this budget there is decline in health budget. But we need to do two things as a country. One is in increasing productivity. Number two is increasing economic opportunities in the rural area. Now, how do we increase productivity in a country which is agro-based and it is depending on rain-fed agriculture? That is really a priority area we need to put in place, and the only way we can do that is to make water accessible for productivity. What is bringing food shortage now is because we don't have water. So the only way we can bring this water to the people is through use of irrigation. So that budget should really put priority to irrigation, which can come through even renewable energy, including solar. And anything to do with taxes on solar facilities should be reduced so that people can access this thing for. And then another issue is on planning.
We are agro-based, so we need to plan our land even for agriculture and other sectors, other competing demands. So planning for our land will be a priority in this. And finally, the issue of infrastructure, roads, health, electricity to boost income. I think that will be important. In this budget framework, I've not seen issues to do with the security roads, which we talked about. I saw other roads. So these are priority areas. I thank you so much, but we must know that we are an agro-based economy and we are depending on rain-fed. We need technology. Thank you.
Nora Kimari, then Ababiku.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for this opportunity to contribute to the debate. Madam Speaker, as a person, I am very, very disappointed to hear that the budget for health is declining. And maybe members need to know that the budget actually is declining from 1.8 trillion to 1.2 trillion. Madam Speaker, we all know that health is fundamental for the economic and social development of this country. Instead of increasing it, instead of trying to attain the Abuja Declaration of 15%, Madam Speaker, we are reducing. Financial year 2015-16, the share of health to the national budget was 8.7. As we speak, it has reduced to 5.7. Surely, as a parliament, I think we should all stand up and do not pass this budget unless the budget for health is increased. We all know that there are no medicines in our health facilities. We know that the health workers are leaving this country, going to Rwanda and other countries for better salaries, and yet we cannot properly remunerate our health workers. So I want to thank Honorable Chivumbi for raising this issue, and I want to call upon everyone, because all of us are here because we have good health. My colleague has talked about agriculture. You cannot go to dig, you cannot trade, you cannot do anything if you are not healthy. And therefore, we should do everything possible to ensure that the health budget increases. I hear the chairperson budget talking about 500 billion, which is still floating there in Ministry of Defense. Madam Speaker, I propose that this budget be brought to the health sector, because health sector still needs more resources, and I had them adding money to other sectors as if the health sector is not useful. Madam Speaker, the women are still dying, as you know. We still have very high maternal mortality in this country. We still lose 16 women, not to mention the babies in their wombs. And if I see, when I hear people trying to talk about reducing the budget for health, I feel very bad, and I want to call upon the government to make sure that the budget increases. Otherwise, some of us are ready to do everything within our powers to ensure this budget is increased instead of reducing. I thank you, Madam Speaker.
Babiku, Babali, then I come to say. I'll come back here. I'll read the names, I'll come back.
Thank you, Right Honourable Speaker, for the opportunity. I want to thank Budget Committee for this report. Based on current biting challenges that we have, I support committee's recommendation that we should have food production and productivity as one of our priorities. Right Honourable Speaker, we said we need to have a clear strategic plan on how we are going to fight scarcity of food in this country. Therefore, it is high time this House received a plan to direct this country on how we are going to minimize on this challenge. And again, we need to have specific plans that shall be financed in this coming budget. Because minus this, Right Honorable Speaker, as people are dying, the labor force will not be maximally used, and at the end, since we are the human resource to implement this budget, we may not achieve so much. Secondly, I want to focus on the issue of roads. I've read carefully what is in the report. Based on what they have said, that many of the projects are not going to be implemented. For example, for Juman District, the issue of 4G and attack is a thorn in our flesh. I agree with the committee's observation and recommendation that some of these promises and expectations needs to be reviewed. Therefore, I request that the government should take it upon itself to go and tell the people about when some of these projects are going to be undertaken. For example, for our road, it is for 2017, and this is 2017. People have been promised, and people are now saying members of parliament have failed to follow these things up. If those statements were made to just get votes, for getting votes, and now that they cannot be implemented in 2017, let government go and withdraw its word so that we know that these things cannot be implemented. On the issue of irrigation, I agree with the committee that it should be spread all over the country based on a research. Because even where rain is somehow stable, there are certain parts in specific districts, including Adjumani, whereby you get 4 sub-counties where the rain is not reliable. Therefore, I totally agree that irrigation should be a priority area. Under health, Right Honorable Speaker, right now what we have as a policy is that we are not going to concentrate on the health center tools. But in this...
Babali, then Karunji. I'll move this side.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I thank the Committee for Budget for the presentation. I've got a few comments. Actually, there are 2 to be precise. One will be on domestic areas. As you may recall, this year, the President read a budget. The budget speech emphasized to clear domestic areas, first quarter of this financial year. Up to now, the domestic areas, they are over 15% of the budget, and they have made the economy look crippled. You have seen banks closing. When you talk about domestic areas, that means the government has applied indirect borrowing from the public. And when we are making a budget, I feel, Madam Speaker, that will be a budget indiscipline. If we see domestic areas, that means the budget has been floated. They are not following the procedures. I have the following requests I want to make. I request that the previous domestic areas, the Treasury comes up and issue promissory notes to local companies so that that one is cleared. And then the local companies in this financial year, they want to come in. The government should embark of establishing local letters of credit so that the local suppliers are very much assured of their money. This one has happened before, where the government used to issue letters of credit to local suppliers because it is within the budget. So I'm of a different opinion that a mere cautioning the accounting officers does not make the matters happen. When you look at civil servants, the teachers, they have borrowed money against their salaries, and the banks are charging interest. And when the government pays, does not pay interest
on top of the domestic arrears. I therefore urge the government also to start paying interest on domestic arrears, because those people have borrowed money from commercial banks, and commercial banks are really moving against them. I beg to move.
Thank you, Right Honorable Speaker. I also want to thank the committee for this. Madam Speaker,
yes, Honorable Karungi.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I've listened very well, and I was wondering, because the chair talked about the number of the substation. That budget is very okay. I'm happy with it. But then I wanted you to add, the president promised Kanungu a substation, and that substation is meant to serve the 3 factories which are there. They are also very important for the economic development of this country, not only Kanungu. And we get a lot of employment from there. So when I don't see it in this budget, and we have been talking about it all this time, and the president himself also promised it, I don't know why it is like that. Madam Speaker, borrowing has become too much really. And I'm very much worried, because I'm seeing that it is even going to increase to 7-point-something trillions. I have to get worried because this is my country. And I'm like, we are borrowing this money. For instance, for roads, I remember the Rukunjiri Shasha Road, we passed the road here in 2014, I remember. The road has never started. That money, we are paying interest on it. And I believe there are equally other projects where we have borrowed money, and the money is just there. No project is going on. Kanungu Road, really. Ishasha Rukunjiri Ishasha Road, Mr. Chairman, it is a serious issue, Madam Speaker. So this borrowing, we should not just take it for, granted, borrowing every day because we can get money. I think we need to sympathize with our country. Madam Speaker, Honorable Chivumbi has said it in the last parliament. We said we have to roll out this social protection program to all the districts. So I am very much frustrated to see that in this budget it is not showing it very well. And this is money which helps even somebody who doesn't even know, where Kampala is, but he or she can manage to live, pay for school fees for the children, manage also to buy a dress and also go to the church. But we are overlooking it. I know we don't have enough money, Madam Speaker. But when you look at this money going to build, for instance, a health center for, I heard Honorable Chivumbi saying that according to the report, it is about 4 billion something. Just 5.6 billion, just a health center for. That's too much money. Mr. Chairman and the Honorable Speaker and the whole House.
Honorable Peter Ochen. Peter Ochen. Kole.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I want to thank the Chair and the Committee of Budget. Madam Speaker, my concern is about the local government. Madam Speaker, when we talk of service delivery, we mean service that are delivered through local government, and that is district and sub-counties. I wonder so much, Madam Speaker, when the budget proposed to deliver service is again getting reduced time and again, when all of us actually hails from this local government. And when we get back there, these indigenous members of the community ask us about the service deliveries we are talking about. And now we are talking about the budget to deliver service at this local community. Madam Speaker, as we talk now, high mortality rate is not seen in Kampala or elsewhere in urban areas. But when you go deep in the villages, it is rampant that women and children are dying. And at the same time, when we talk about budget, you find the health budget is getting reduced. Madam Speaker, we have health facilities which have not been operationalized. Hence, they have been upgraded to Health Center 3 and Health Center 4. And this is a government policy that every sub-county must have a Health Center 3, and every county must have a Health Center 4. How are these going to be operationalized if the budget is going down? Madam Speaker, it is my wish that the budget for local government be raised, and respectively, the budget for health go up. Thank you.
Polot, then Oguzu, then I come here, then I come this way. Jacob Polot.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I want to thank the committee for the issues raised. And as Honorable Karunji had stated, and also from what the minority report reflects, I want to refer us to what we resolved in the 9th Parliament about the rollout of SAGE and the commitments that government made to provide for money to make sure that we roll out to every 100 oldest person in all the sub-counties in the country. Unfortunately, much as the government made this commitment, it's becoming a back and forth struggle. And we are wondering, if you commit to provide about 27 billion in a particular year, why wouldn't you provide it? Who else is expected to provide that money? For instance, in the provisions for next financial year, we are short of 11.6 billion. And that means that both the new districts and the national rollout cannot be achieved. So I would wish even to hear from the Minister of Finance, what does this mean in terms of the planning of this country? Because you commit yourself, and the donors also who are supporting the program have already planned expected counterpart funding, and then you don't. It's very embarrassing because it shows that you are not sincere in your commitments, and therefore it's very difficult for anybody to plan based on what you have committed, because they will not expect you to fulfill it. And Madam Speaker, the way this program is being implemented is clearly discriminatory. There are many, actually more parts of the country that are left out. That means more older persons are left out and just only a few. And when we resolved on a national rollout, we're trying to make sure that everything is done equitably so that there is harmony in the country, other than a situation where some parts of the country or some districts look at others as the advantaged and benefiting at their expense. So, Madam Speaker, I will wish to hear the commitments renewed from the Minister of Finance so that we can be sure on the way forward. And I would also wish to hear about the roadmap for the national rollout so that we can have a clear message to share with our people out there on what they should expect and when they should expect the national rollout of SAGE so that all older persons who are eligible are reached. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Rewoguzu, then Onyoraj, Kigozi, then we go to you, and then I come here. Come out. Sometimes I don't like the name, I don't know. Whether to say Chigozi or Sajali Avena. Yes, yes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I only need to seek clarification on a few things. Last year, at the helm of the food insecurity in our country, we demanded to draw from the contingents fund, and that money was not there. And when I read through the presentation of the chair, I didn't hear anything particular about it. I wanted to know what will happen to the contingents fund in this financial year. 2, we opened our boundaries to refugees from other countries. And when refugees come to your area, they degrade your environment. They have to share resources like roads, hospitals with host communities. And when I listened to the presenter, I did not hear any specific development assistance program for host communities. I wanted to hear what going forward that means for the communities as their resources get shared and constrained. Thirdly, I would want to know, particularly from the Minister of Finance, we have been losing money in road sector. We've had cases where people get compensated every time an infrastructure backbone runs through an area, say power or water or roads, and each time people get compensated. Are you planning for a national integrated master plan which will define infrastructure corridors such that going forward we do not have to spend on compensation and thus saving government money? Thank you.
Vanyoraj, then Sajaria Vene. Then you come here, then you come to side.
Thank you very much, Right Honorable Speaker. Right Honorable Speaker, in May 2007, we lost very many Ugandans to a bomb blast in Somalia. Surprising to note, one of them was called Wanda from Kamuli, your own district. Another one was Wilbur, I think from Chirihura. Another one was Kilama from Gulu, Awach sub-county. And these young guys died because they went on a peacekeeping mission. The peacekeeping mission under UN, the AMISOM, has been so costly to Ugandans in terms of personnel, in terms of our own innocent children who have been killed, in terms of even the amount of money we have appropriated from this parliament and sent to Somalia, and we have no absolutely any updated amounts which have been, record of amounts which have been sent back to us in terms of compensation. Right Honorable Speaker, under the peacekeeping mission, we know very well that member states who have sent their countries, their soldiers or other personnel, are compensated by UN. You appropriate anything for operations, the salaries depending on the scale of your country, and these monies are compensated. Right now, Kenya is demanding 26 billion US dollars for only 1 year operation. How much have been compensated? How much have been paid back to us? So when we see a 500 billion, which is purportedly hanging, I think Somalia mission has been used to corrupt this government, to steal our money in all the ways possible. So Right Honorable Speaker, don't see that 500 billion as a misplaced amount. No. Government should give us audited information of how much we have received from the UN. Two, Right Honorable Speaker, the clarification from the minister maybe. No, that will be later. Now, Right Honorable Speaker, number two, we made a resolution here that our poor parents, these old grandfathers, nationwide, begin receiving money under SAGE. Right Honorable Speaker, it's only 25,000 Ugandan shillings. In Kenya, it is 75,000 Ugandan shillings. In Finland, as we...
Point of order, Honorable Kuraije.
Madam Speaker, every Ugandan soldier that has been wounded in AMISOM gets, or rather, wounded or killed, gets compensated by AMISOM. Can I be allowed to continue?
No, let him inform us.
I'm giving you information, please. Let me continue. First of all,
order, members.
What happens? AMISOM sends a medical team that does assessment, and that process is still going on. Is it in order, therefore? For a member to stand and misinform this House that our soldiers have not been compensated. Madam Speaker.
Honourable members, this House has not received a report of the death compensation of the soldiers. If you did, you would know. We don't know. Please conclude.
Besides, Honorable Speaker, my most respected Colonel Kulaije is still new in this House. And if anything, you should read how the AMISOM operations are done and how member states are compensated, are refunded for the money that are appropriate for peacekeeping operations. Besides, we even don't know whether those soldiers you're talking about have been compensated. Up to now.
Thank you, Right Honourable Speaker. I would like to thank the presenters, but then I would like the report. If I understood you right, you said that there is a schedule of roads. I would like to have a look at that schedule of roads, because my constituency, and actually Wakiso in general, has most of the roads that are congesting Kampala, and it pains for somebody to drive for 2 hours from Masaka to here and spends another 1.5 hours from Chengera to town. So I'd like to have a schedule and see what is happening. Secondly, if I had the minority report right, I would like to suggest that the 850 that can be saved from the oil roads be transferred to UNLA, because from the infrastructure committee where I sit, we have been made to understand that they have a shortfall of 818 billion. If we gave them this money, maybe it would make a lot of sense. Secondly, I don't know whether the Ministry of Health is aware that Wakiso district, with over 3 million people and 4 municipalities, has only one hospital, Entebbe B Hospital. So we would like to, of course, State House is almost taking it actually. It is actually, they're contesting it. We'd like to have a position on the health facilities in the country. And lastly, Madam Speaker, I would like to see this budget developing policies that put money in the pockets of the common man. If the millions of people in the villages can earn a monthly income of at least minimum 200,000 per person, you will see the industries prospering, because they will create an effective demand in the economy. Right now, money that is being distributed is not trickling down to the people. When they get the money, then the next step should be to start import substitution industries. We are getting substandard products from everywhere all over the world. Let us start our own industries, start consuming substandard products from our own industries, and develop the industries instead of allowing those people to take our money. We should also...
Honorable Namaya Njadini Kamanda.
Thank you very much, Right Honorable Speaker. I would like to thank the chairperson of the committee for the report, and also thank a member of the committee for the minority report. Madam Speaker, the committee has indicated in their report that the funds for irrigation are scattered between ministries of agriculture and Ministry of Water. And the committee has also recommended that a competent body be established to pull resources together to get the funds. The committee has not indicated that body they are talking about and how competent it is. I'm wondering whether the committee thinks that these ministries are not competent, and they want to establish another body for the irrigation funds. On that one, I need to be clarified. But I feel, Madam Speaker, that water resources should be under the Ministry of Water to take care of water and ensure that the resources are well catered for. And then irrigation, the Ministry of Agriculture uses the water for that purpose. Madam Speaker, also I would like to know from the minority report the kind of health center that would cost 2.6 billion, and health center 3, and also 5.6 billion for health center 4. We have seen people hiding behind the figures to steal money. I think it is important for all of us to get this explanation, because when I go back to Koto East, I want to explain to my people that we are getting a health center 3 at that cost, and this is what it means. I think the responsible ministry or the committee probably will explain. Thank you very much.
Now Kavanda, then Guma, Guma then Orot.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker, for the opportunity. I'd like to thank the committee for the report and the committee member for the minority report. Honorable Speaker, for me, I'm so disappointed when I heard that the budget for health has been reduced. The United Nations, the recent report for the United Nations and the World Health Report indicates that AIDS has increased, nearly doubled here in the central. And the United Nations and the World Health have an intention for having this country, Uganda, AIDS-free by 2030. We must join our hands together with them. So if we are reducing the budget, it means that we are not going to achieve that. Secondly, Honorable Speaker, outside there is a team, the village health team workers. Those people are doing a lot of work. They are not paid anything. I think something small should be put in the budget as it has been suggested for the councillors to pay those people something. They gave them, so many years ago, they gave them bicycles. And now they are very, very old. They are doing a great work outside there. We should think about them also. I also noted the climate, everybody sees it. The climate is changing. But here in Uganda, we don't have, the irrigation policy is not yet out. And money has been allocated. I request you, Honorable Speaker, to request those concerned. The first thing they should do before they release the money for irrigation is to have an irrigation policy, the one which we are going to use as Ugandans. It's not there. Lastly, the committee has been very silent on the food policy in the primary schools. There is no money allocated at all. And the Minister of Education, the First Lady, whenever he goes out, he talks about the food policy in the primary schools. How are you going to achieve that, to ensure that every child in primary school gets lunch if the budget has not allocated anything at all to implement that? I thank you.
Okay, as Honorable Guma comes, I want the Minister, we are talking about irrigation. I think we're going to irrigate the beans and the maize. but we have an obligation under the SDGs on climate change. Where are the trees we are going to irrigate? We are going to get the maize and the beans and get food. But what are we doing about climate change? There's under goal number 13, you are required to take urgent action to combat climate change and its impacts. In your budget, apart from irrigating food, you have not, there's nothing about climate change. Honorable Guma.
Madam Speaker, I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to give some contribution. I'm called Major Guma, I come from Uganda North. First of all, I want to say that this is the most, or perhaps one of the most important debates that we should engage in and should attract the attention of majority of us. Because it is a discussion, it is a debate concerning of the sustenance of Ugandans. And unfortunately, a number of us are in the corridors. The attention is not as sufficient as I would have thought. Because I think that this is the most important debate that concerns a member of parliament, to discuss the economy, to discuss ways and means, to discuss resource allocation. And much of the discussion is centering on the sharing rather than of the ways and means of raising what share. So I find it extremely unfortunate that, and I pity Ndugu Bahati and his senior minister, that they are managing a shrinking cake. They are managing a resource envelope, to use the World Bank terminology, that increasingly is getting smaller and smaller vis-a-vis the number of Ugandans and all our needs. And less attention increasingly is getting paid to the ways and means of raising money to cater for various competing needs. Attention is given to sharing rather than priority of revamping the economy. Many times, Madam Speaker, I have been here with you for a while. We have raised all these issues. The answer is on a record. We have been raising all these issues, that the economy is not quite on the correct path. And now, some few turbulences like the climate change, you see the tremor, you hear the tremor. In fact, wait for this midway 2017. Even the question of food will be a challenge. Just food, forget about the money. Chakura, food, it will be a big challenge. It's already a challenge, I think, in certain parts of the country, like Teso and Karamoja. Honorable Rafael who? Magezi. Ebre made the point that district allocations have remained so for many years. And the bulk of our people, your intelligence, that the bulk of our people, very briefly,
Half a minute.
Live there. So it's high time that government increased the allocations to various districts of the country. One presidential candidate last elections wanted to manipulate the thinking of councillors. One presidential candidate, I don't remember him, wanted to use the question of councillors to manipulate their political thinking. And this is Honorable Magezi's point. So these councillors, really, they get peanuts and yet subjected to taxation. So finally, Madam Speaker, and planners, Honorable Bahati David, and the consultants who are accompanying you, pay attention to fish subsector. Fish subsector, there is a professional write-up about fish, that if Lake Victoria was properly managed, the country's budget would be balanced. I have finished.
Honorable Rot, then Muyanja Hatwib,
Thank you, Madam Speaker, Right Honorable Speaker. I am Honorable Rot, Member of Parliament, Kanyumu County. Right Honorable Speaker, the budget should always target the outputs, what the money will bring later, which we are going to appropriate. However, we are looking at the budget which is so theoretical. We need a budget to be so practical. For example, in this area of agriculture, they have not touched the issue of zoning. What can do very well in a certain region vis-a-vis the other regions, so that this issue of silos can be seen being practical. Otherwise, the silos can end up being very, very empty, and people will continue being insecure. There is also the issue of the issue of extension staff. I'd been LOC5 for the last 15 years before I came here. But the extension staff is not enough. Even the real human resource, for example, you can see a parish chief governing 5 parishes. It's happening all over the country. Now, the budget should see how we can add more parish chiefs, like in those olden days of whereby a parish chief could be very, very effective on the ground, and therefore see good service delivery being implemented. Madam Speaker, the country is very, very productive, and the people are very, very energetic, but they need a lot of guidance. For example, my colleague from Wakiso mentioned something. The treasury looks dry now in Kampala because there is nothing to be sold by a common man on the ground. If the common man is empowered on the ground, you will realize that money reaching up to the treasury here, and then the country will be having liquid. So we should not bring here theoretical budgets. Our role as members of parliament is to assist the government to deliver good services so that the government can stay longer in leadership and in power comfortably. Otherwise, the communities are very, very poor. And this poverty, like when we talk of famine now in Teso region, okay, that one has been elaborated, but look at health. Madam Speaker, can you believe that Syrian birth in the up country can cost a family about 450,000 shillings? Sell a cow, sell a garden? Because the health sector, immediately these technocrats learn from hospitals that the budget of health has reduced. Today, they will get demoralized to work. So, Madam Speaker, the ministry or the Minister of Finance should find money and should utilize all the money instead of saying that some money is hanging somewhere which would deliver good service to the population. So, Madam Speaker, I beg to move. Thank you very much.
Muyanja Hatwib, the sub-BT, Nabakova.
Thank you, Right Honorable Speaker.
No, him, Hatwib, and then sub-BT.
Right Honorable Speaker, really I'm from Public Service and Local Government Committee. In the 9th Parliament, you allocated money for bicycles, but only half of the districts were given bicycles. Local council one chairpersons, as much as they are not happy with the law of lining behind, but they are ready to go for elections. Can we consider the remaining 59 districts to have bicycles? Because it requires only 9 billion. When you look at the huge amounts of money, Right Honorable Speaker, we can preserve 9 billion. Second, Right Honorable Speaker, loads for sub-counties. Sub-counties, when you look at the proposed estimates, every quarter they are getting less than 1 million for loads. And all of us can agree, when it comes, the money goes to the district, it becomes a problem. We are requesting that at least money for sub-counties be increased from 1.2 million every quarter at least to 5 million. Because in public service, we manage to save money from seminars and workshops and even travel abroad. As I conclude, Honorable Speaker, you can see that in the presentation, there is too much money for motor vehicle maintenance. And when you look around, Right Honorable Speaker, in the parkings, Uganda House go down, we have over 700 vehicles for government which are parked. Some of them reserved for the technical people who are ready to buy them cheaply. Time has come for this parliament to demand for all government vehicles to be pulled out from garages and parkings to at least Nambole Stadium, where we can even collect billions and billions of money. But Right Honorable Speaker, a brand new trooper is packed and sold out at 400,000. Within 2 months, it is on the road, costing over 20 million. That's my humble request to the States Parliament. I thank you.
Honorable Atwib first. After Atwib, then you come. Then we'll go to Navakova.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Kampala, I will come to Kampala. Yes.
I think we are losing track as government. For example, Your Excellency, the President, during his campaign, promised that at least each and every village will get 2 sources of clean water for drinking. But as I talk now, Madam Speaker, we have reached the extent where you can go in a village and people can't access water. Even they cannot shower. For example, in my constituency, I've resorted to touch my own pocket to buy water sources. When they send money to the districts, they are told that they are not supposed to buy water sources and where the tanks can be. So, Madam, how are we going to achieve that when I read through this budget? Because people need clean water. Then, Madam Speaker, Operation Wealth Creation has turned into Operation Wealth Destruction and poverty creation, because we thought the army would improve this, but no. How can you bring seedlings to a person who will not plant it and you force him to sign? At the end of the day, the seed is dry. Government has already put in money, it is going to pay the suppliers. So, Madam Speaker, the 2.753, I take your information.
Thank you, Honorable. Madam Speaker, on the 18th, I did receive an SMS, and I was of a letter where the Brigadier Kayanja had communicated to Major Chong, who is in charge of wealth creation, NADS in Castillo County, a message that members of parliament should facilitate the 2 farmers who are going for training in Hoima. So if it is wealth creation, we are now the funders. When did we budget for members of parliament to provide money to facilitate the farmers to be trained in Hoima?
Thank you for your information. Madam Speaker, such nasty things are happening in the constituencies. I'm telling you, someone doesn't want coffee, but because of connivance, they bring coffee, it is put under the shade till it dries. The government is supposed to pay the supplier. So are we creating wealth or we are creating poverty and again destructing wealth? Madam Speaker, when I go to the issue...
Sabiti, then Navakova. Yes, then we shall go to the middle there.
I thought I was. Thank you, Right Honorable Speaker. Sabit Dennis from Rwanda West constituency. Right Honorable Speaker, allow me to comment on the 15 roads in the Albertine region. Right Honorable Speaker, these roads are not going to be constructed in the coming financial year only. I presented a paper to the Budget Committee showing what is going to be spent in this coming financial year in 18/19 and then in 19/20, and it is quite detailed. So the money you are talking about is for actual roads which have reached advanced stages of procurement where a contractor is about to come on board. The total number of roads are 15. Yes.
Honourable Member,
Order.
you are taking issue with
Order.
the
Can I continue?
government's position.
Order. Order.
Point of order, Honourable.
Right Honorable Speaker, the current speaker is the member of the Budget Committee, an ex-official, and the chairperson of the Roads and Fiscal Infrastructure. The honorable member was part of the committee where we are presented with the list of roads, and only 2 roads had road designs. The rest did not have even a feasibility study. Is in order to come here, and Honorable Speaker, the honorable member also had very disjointed information before the committee. Who would have spared him was one of the chairpersons who didn't have correct figures. Is in order to come here and misrepresent facts and say that the 15 roads are all going to be, they have contractors. Are you in order to misrepresent Parliament?
Now, Honourable Member, first of all, you are a member of the Budget Committee. I don't know whether you should even be speaking. You should not even be speaking.
Well,
No,
I am an ex-official and I only made a presentation to the Budget Committee.
Even ex-official, you are a member. Yes, you are a member of the Budget Committee.
Can I continue?
This is your report. This is your report, all of you. No.
Okay.
Honourable Navakoba. Then Ajilo. After Navakoba.
Thank you, Right Honorable Speaker, for giving me the opportunity. Right Honorable Speaker,
Oh, you're also a member of the...
I want to clarify.
No, you're also a member of the Budget Committee. You're a chairperson. Let's go to Kabera Maido. But as Honorable Ajiro comes, I want to announce the presence of a delegation from Dokoro North, represented by Honorable Amoru and Honorable Ogwal. We were there during this weekend. Welcome. Yes, Honorable Ajiro.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would like to thank the presenters, the chairperson, and the one who presented the minority report. I have 2 issues to comment about. The committee talked about the revival of the cooperative movement, the farmers who are the base of our production, because we know that we are an agricultural country. Now, before you talk about reviving the movement, the 20 billion compensation as compared to what the minority report talked about, 58.3, is not going to help the revival of the societies and the cooperative unions. If you really want to revive the movement, the compensation should first be taken as a priority. Most of these unions and societies are already so crippled. They have suffered over the years consequences of civil strife, the looting, their assets have all been gone, and they have been asking government over the years to have their assets compensated. They are not in production, they are not doing anything. Teso Cooperative Union, where I come from, is already asking for 6 billion, and they have been asking for the last 10 years to no avail. So if we are serious on revival of the movement, let it be a first priority that they are compensated. And we talk of extension workers. I think along with the agricultural extension workers, the revival of the movement goes alongside the provision of the cooperative extension workers, so that the societies will be carried along using the cooperative principles. The second point that I want to comment about, others have talked about, the wealth creation, Operation Wealth Creation. Teso region has been zoned for citrus growing, but like my colleagues have already said, Madam Speaker, the provision of these seedlings are already problematic. There are already issues. A colleague has talked about how the seedlings are brought when they are already dry. In Kabaramaido in September, people just wake up in the morning and see a truck landing at a trading center. There is no consideration who had applied for that enterprise. They only deal with the people that they find around. They look up anybody who can sign for it. For them, they have already made their accountability. The things were abandoned, and a lot of money is being spent, Madam Speaker, on the Operation Wealth Creation.
Information from Soroti? Will you take it?
Okay.
Information from Soroti.
My neighbor.
Thank you, Right Honorable Speaker and the Honorable colleague. The information I'd like to give this House is that whilst Teso has been zoned for citrus growing and seedlings are being supplied by Operation Wealth Creation, the factory that is being targeted is specifically supposed to consume a certain type of citrus or orange fruit. And when they are supplying seedlings, they are supplying anything. And recently they declared certain varieties not supposed to be consumed by the factory. And that has discouraged so many farmers. Some of them have cut down their trees. So we also need to know, as they supply the seedlings, they should supply that which can be consumed.
Thank you, colleague, for that information. Like my colleague has just informed, not every variety.
Honorable Katali Gafabusa Asamo, then I come this side.
Thank you, Right Honourable Speaker. I would like to thank the Chair and the members for coming up with the report. And I would also like to thank my colleague on the opposite side.
You are the Vice Chair of the Finance Committee. Yeah. Gafabusa, please sit down. Gafabusa.
Thank you.
Then we go to Assemble. Then I come this side.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Richard Gafabusa, Boamba Bundibujo. I join my colleagues, thank the chairman of the committee, but also specifically Honorable Kivumbi for the minority report. I was so touched by the surgery of the minority main report. I want to talk about mainly allocation to the local governments. And this is where we expect much of the service delivery to come from. And we are all engulfed in this circus. When we go back to the district, the constituencies, the health sector, the roads, education, and all others, the meager resources allocated to the local governments do not make the local governments able to deliver the services as required. And we are all questioned by the people. Most of them don't even look at what comes from the center. And I'm told this same parliament previously had looked at this, and a recommendation was made that we need to give at least 38% of the national budget to the local governments. I'm disturbed that continuously the allocation is going down to a mere 11%. I urge you, the House, that we need to allocate more money to the local governments so that they are able to provide these services to the people. Madam Speaker, I'm disturbed on the issue of poor loans absorption. This is paradoxical. We are talking about inadequate resources. At the same time, we are talking about the lack of capacity to absorb and utilize these funds. So what are we talking about? I entirely agree, and I urge members to support the recommendation by Honorable Kivumbi that if a ministry, a department, an agency is unable to absorb and utilize at least 50% of the monies allocated to them, then we shouldn't continue borrowing more money to give them. Let us allocate money to those departments and ministries that are able to deliver, able to absorb. Otherwise, we will keep rotating on the paradox of no money, at the same time, inadequate capacity to spend and utilize these resources. I thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Honorable Asamo, then Nandara, Mbwa, Lugogo, then I get this group here. Yes, Kampala is coming. After Lugogo, Kampala is coming. Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Right Honorable Speaker. Right Honorable Speaker, I want to thank the committee chair and also the person who presented the minority report. Madam Speaker, this year, a policy on early child development was passed by this government, but I'm not very sure that I've had the funds that have been allocated for the early child development. And this is something that the Minister of Education and Minister of Gender promised this country was going to take off. So we need to get to hear from the minister. When are we starting this? Because we are told all schools will have early child development centers. So where is the money to start this? Madam Speaker, recently our boys were in Gabon and fundraising was going around. I have had increments allocated to other areas like agriculture, area of irrigation. There is no budget line for sports. And we're again waiting to put fireworks when the time comes to say, how do we get these boys this way and that way? They need to start the training now. And we need that budget to be allocated. When these people are out there, they're carrying the flag of Uganda. They're not going there as individuals. And I think we need to look at this. Madam Speaker, I want to support the idea of the baseline surveys, especially in the social sector. Right now we are talking about the NADS, Operation Wealth Creation, which gives people seeds which they don't demand for. Madam Speaker, we need to demand for a report. How much has wealth creation done? What is down there on the ground? Have our people benefited before even we talk of passing this budget? Because we are enriching certain people. The new strategy is coming to look at people who have something better. What about some of us who represent the poor of the poorest? When will they benefit from this Operation Wealth Creation? Because they will not even be picked among the farmers who are going to be trained. So, Madam Speaker, as we talk of passing the Operation Wealth Creation, which is meant to promote prosperity, I think we need to demand for accountability of what has been done. And a lot of seeds have been wasted. Madam Speaker, I want to support the idea of SAGE rolling out to all countries, all districts. At least let's start with 100, and this money should be provided so that our old people who worked for this country, who are down there suffering with children who have lost their parents because of HIV/AIDS, should be given support. And Madam Speaker, this Parliament has talked about the pensioners. I don't know what is happening to the areas. We are promised sometime. Now this budget again has come. The pensioners are not well reflected. I think we need an answer, because these old people are going to die and leave this money without benefiting it.
Nandala. Then Mbwa.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the reason why the budget is not performing very well is because we have left out what is the most important item: development versus consumption. The biggest corruption in the country is through procurement. And the moment money is lost in procurement, you will borrow more money to be able to do little work. And currently, interest rate and repayment is the third after education and health. If we borrow up to 7.3 trillion, only interest payment is going to be about 365 billion. If you add on the principal payments, you may go to about 800 billion. Yet, if you borrowed for a road, instead of doing a road for $300,000, which is about 700 million, you are doing it for 5.5 billion. That means money wasted, stolen, is 4.8 billion. This is the problem. It is procurement, and unless we come out with formulas to deal with the minimum cost, we can't do much. Madam Speaker, when I was the chairman of National Economy, that's in 2126, when Honorable Guma was my member, he knows. We recall we did a survey in Ethiopia, in East Africa, in South Africa, on roads. Yes, I think that's Professor Ratigo was also my member. Now, when we did, it came up clear and said that roads in Uganda are just too expensive because of theft. All over those regions, the roads were between $180,000 to $220,000. Recently, I carried out a research. Again, Ethiopia is still around $200,000 a kilometer. What is the problem? Bitumen is from the same area. Petroleum is, chips are from everywhere. In fact, stones in Uganda we don't import. And labor is the cheapest. Why are our roads very expensive? It is us, ourselves as Parliament, who are allowing it to continue. Unless you get up and say, what is the cost of a kilometer of a road? Madam Speaker, as Honorable Goma said, we needed time. This thing we call the elderly. There is no difference from the elder in Bugisu and the elder in Kabale and the elder in Karamoja. If the money is little, let us divide it equally. And that one will help everybody. Even if they get 5,000, they will buy a half a kilo of sugar and buy a bar of what? Soap. This applies to loans, education loans. Madam Speaker, the loans have become the center for corruption. Education loan, everybody qualifies. I am a Ugandan. If I passed, I must qualify.
1 minute for the elderly.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, for the elderly. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, for recognizing the elderly. Madam Speaker, scholarships. It is a potential area again for corruption. That body they have put there. Let me ask, if we have all passed, is it English I write in the application to qualify for a scholarship, for a loan, or the way I laugh, or the way I come? Why can't we put a mechanism and say that if you have not got this government sponsorship, between this point to this point, you are entitled to a loan, so that the system is clear and every kid goes there and gets a what? A loan. Madam Speaker, if we don't do that, we're in problem. Everybody you are creating corruption. There is a parent from Bramboli who has worked there. They have taken 600,000 already, and the money they are about to chase a kid from Chambogo University. I have evidence, and I'm ready to tear up that institution unless they make it good. Madam Speaker, borrowing without approval from Parliament. Madam Speaker, this Minister of Finance has gone very far. Nowadays, they borrow using the Attorney General. I am going to even bring here documents to prove that. That's very dangerous. Parliament is supposed to approve all borrowings. And that's why, Madam Speaker, you are seeing this loan is going high at a very fast rate. Unless, again, we assert ourselves, I think we are going to get finished.
Point of order. Point of order from the Minister of Finance.
Madam Order. Madam, I beg your pardon. Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, no, he's still there. Madam Speaker, is it in order for the senior member of this House to really allege that the government of Uganda is borrowing money without the approval of Parliament? And then we just allow, can he substantiate here and bring the papers? Or for now you withdraw? I do not know any loan that the government of Uganda has procured without the approval of Parliament.
Honorable Member, the 1995 Constitution altered that position of the government borrowing by itself and made Parliament the partner in borrowing. So if you have evidence that they have been borrowing without us, please tell us.
Madam Speaker, I've been looking for such an opportunity. And tomorrow, the first thing when I come in is to submit some documents. But all of you have seen one of the borrowing which took place. Crane Bank was given 200 billion shillings, yet you remember we capitalized the Bank of Uganda with 1.1 trillion. So the 200 billion which went to Crane Bank was the taxpayers' what? Money. And the Constitution of Uganda says you will not guarantee a loan, you will not do anything without parliamentary what? Approval. So what is this? So, Madam Speaker, tomorrow I am going to bring evidence. Yes. So, Madam Speaker, thank you for the information, Madam Speaker.
Members, that point, there's a point which Honorable Nanda raised about the cost of roads. I don't know whether we cannot pick up our report from the last Parliament and see how to move, because today we had about 6 billion in one sector. Smanya, next time we shall have 10 billion. Maybe we should, yes, Honorable Kakoza.
It's not only in one sector. I think it's the departments of all government. Honorable Chifumbi has said a point, which in the committee we had, I'm a member of the committee. There is no way in Uganda, a health center 3, even to think about it, to construct a health center 3, a maternity ward, at 2.7 billion, 2,700 million, a store, a health center 3, at a sub-county level, even somebody to imagine and put it in a medium-term framework. There must be a standard of construction in government. A health center 4 at 5.7 billion, and somebody, technocrat, writes it in the paper and the Parliament approves. This is why we need now to assert ourselves that these documents which technocrats bring to us, we must scrutinize them and maybe advise how to go about them. Construction in government is the way of stealing money. They don't have a standard. The roads, they don't have a standard. So if it's known now, it's our Parliament to make a research. And we say enough is enough. This should be the minimum we can appropriate to Health Center 3, Health Center 4, and also roads. That's how we can stop it.
Maybe I think about it, by the time we close, we should have a strategy of how to address this costs. They are just astronomical. Please think about it. By the time we close the debate, let's have a strategy. Honorable Mbwa, then Kasivante, Lubogo.
Thank you so much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I wish to commend the committee for having proposed that at least we need to have a comprehensive plan for irrigation, maybe putting up a board that will take care of irrigation, unlike going the presidential way, the rudimentary way of irrigating using a bicycle, of which it cannot work in this century. Madam Speaker, you will realize, honorable members, that even when the president had even a bicycle, he had more than 7 people who were assisting him. One carrying lifting a jerrycan, another one putting here. So that one cannot help Ugandans. If you go to Zimbabwe, it receives rain twice a year. But it has been a food basket of Africa through irrigation. Even Europe. So, honorable members, instead of approving loans like borrowing money to support refugees, of what importance is it to us, to our people? Why shouldn't we think about our people and ourselves? We are already refugees maybe in our country. Madam Speaker, let me go to health. We are proposing that we need to go preventive other than curative. But it is a pity when you just look at the budget of PHC, primary health care. They've not increased the budget. And even the little money that is supposed to go for PHC, they retain part of the money centrally that it is for development. But when you look at these health centers, they've been constructing buildings, which means when you construct a building, you must put in power. You must put in water. So you find that the budget is not increasing for PHC. And as a result, you've been seeing on TV, they are even cutting off for the hospitals that now are in total darkness. Granted,
From Oyam.
Thank you so much, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Honorable Member, for giving way. The information that I want to give you is that because of limited money for to the district for the health center 3s and 4s, recently in my district there was health center 3, which had no functioning water. The borehole was broken down, but the in-charge did not have money even to repair the borehole. I had to come in because pregnant women were coming, they were delivered, but there was no water. So I had to pick 1.4 million to help the pregnant women who are delivered, to make sure that health center 3 was working.
Finally, Madam Speaker, we need to think about uplifting the standards of health workers. Someone who has been receiving 66,000 as lunch allowance, even if you're given that money, in the village, you cannot even have at least a decent lunch.
Honorable Kasivante.
Thank you very much, Right Honorable Speaker.
Rubogo, then,
let me thank the chairman of the committee for a comprehensive report, and Honorable Mwanga Chivumbi for a more conclusive report. Madam Speaker and members, my first concern is with the State House scholarship. When Honorable Chivumbi was talking about this, I saw the government of Uganda putting Ugandans into 2 categories of people. One are those with children who only qualify for UPE, USE, and the like. And UPE, Right Honorable Speaker, the capitation grant per child is 10,000 shillings, and that is per year. A year has got 3 terms, and that is actually 3,000 shillings per term. A term has 3 months. That could actually mean it is 1,000 per month. A month has at least 30 days. Then divide 1,000 by 30. You would be getting like 23 shillings per day. That is one category. Another category is that one that goes to State House. Actually, His Excellency one time was responding to queries to do with the State House scholarship procedures and was saying, no, these are people who come to my house and disturb me. They want school fees. What can I do with them? How many of our constituents can access State House? At one time, I was arrested around in Akulabye when I actually wanted to go State House and demand for what was due for me. A honorable member of parliament. Now, there is a category of Ugandans that goes to State House and they can disturb the president of Uganda. The lowest paid per term of this category, Right Honorable Speaker, is 700,000 shillings. Lowest per term in primary. They got the best schools in Kampala, best schools around the country. In fact, those at university, they go overseas. Information from Honorable Seungu.
Information from Karungu.
Yeah, Madam Speaker, I want to thank the honourable member for giving way. As a Committee of Education, we really agree that State House sponsorship should stop. And all this money should go to the loan scheme. Secondly, as I conclude my information, we've met head teachers, we've met brothers heading schools, and they really laugh at what is happening. Let me give an example. You find a child in St. Mary's College on State House sponsorship, and the father is a rich man picking the son in a Benz. And he's capable, but he's on State House sponsorship.
Thank you for that information.
But I wanted to just clarify that it was not just an education resolution, it was endorsed by this House. Yes, it's a resolution of the House. Yes.
Right Honorable Speaker, as Honorable Mwanga rightly put it, the 9th Parliament scrapped this State House scholarship in favor of the rest of Ugandans. Because it is not all of Ugandans that they can go and access the president at his residence. Right Honorable Speaker, because of the time limit, the issue of feeding at school for children has totally been ignored. The last time the Minister of Education spoke about this was advising parents to go and buy food flasks. Now, a Ugandan who cannot afford school fees of 10,000 shillings was being advised by the Minister for Education to go and buy food flasks.
Yes,
I have tried to do some research. The lowest in a supermarket around Kampala.
Point of...
Thank you so much, Right Honourable Speaker, for according me this opportunity. Right Honourable Speaker, I believe the members are here presenting pertinent issues that are concerning the budget and therefore the economy of this country. It is unfortunate, Right Honourable Speaker, that all our ministers who are supposed to keep taking notes and ensure that the budget concerns that the members are raising are taken care of. Is it procedurally correct, Right Honourable Speaker, for us to continue discussing, and yet the people who are supposed to keep taking notes and ensure that the Ugandans, is it procedurally correct for us to continue debating this budget, Right Honourable Speaker? Because I'm realizing that the ministers are not really interested in the budget, are not taking it as a matter of concern, and are not taking it seriously. Is it procedurally correct for us to continue discussing?
Honourable members, one of the members of this House today said that this is one of the most important debates this year, where members are giving their views on the government proposals, and also making proposals on the budget. We'll have time when? members are not satisfied by the presence of three of you. Eh? Where? No, honor members, I think government should respect this house. This is their budget framework paper. Members are making very important contributions. These are serious decisions for the country. We want the government here. So house suspended until tomorrow. So we shall, instead of finishing, we'll have to continue.
Next time we shall sit here and take over. There's nothing serious going in this campaign. No, but when you are there, you can get there. You have a room. Honorable Bahati, next time we shall take over this row. Yes.
Okay, house adjourned to tomorrow at 2.
This is a shame. This is a shame. But when is the chief? Even if the Prime Minister?